don't want to keep turning away because of the microphone, so I'm just trying to have something else in front of me. Although, actually... Actually, hold on. I've got a spare computer under the table. Hold on a second. I want to see if I can make this work. Ah.
Oh man, I wish that was recording.
That's a terrible start for season 2 of Hello Internet.
Season 2.
Episodes.
We're back for another 10.
Yes, we're back for another 10 episodes for Hello Internet. This is a funny thing for us to be recording because we just put the last episode up, and I know because of some scheduling uncertainties, the next episode will probably not be up until the very end of April. So once again, just like at the beginning, it feels like we have a little secret. People aren't sure, people are guessing, are there going to be more episodes? And we know, but obviously you, dear listener, at the moment I'm speaking, do not know. But of course, now that you're listening, you do know. So, welcome back, and I hope people will stick with us for another 10 episodes of two dudes talking on Hello Internet.
So, I was speculating about why you've decided to go for another 10. And I've come up with a few possible sort of reasons. Starting with the least likely options first. I thought maybe you just really enjoy talking to me and you like the sound of my voice. And
you underestimate yourself, Brady. I do really like talking to you.
Alright, well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's the whole reason. Maybe so many people have subscribed to the services that have advertised on the podcast that we just had to do more. Like, there was this ridiculous number of people going to Audible and Squarespace and using the code, the Hello Internet code, and it just they demanded another 10 episodes.
That is the best way to show support for the show at this time. And yes, I do know from advertisers that they have been happy with the response so far, so that certainly helps.
I thought maybe you had more to say. You wanted to bring the teaching profession down further with more of your scathing attacks on the education system.
Not really. We were talking about this before. I feel like I don't want to talk about teaching anymore, but that you are going to be trying to trick me into saying things that I might regret.
You're going to have to do it today and follow up. But finally, I think that the main reason for another 10 episodes is the sudden and runaway success of Plane Crash Corner and Brady's Paper Cuts.
You have really latched onto this one, my friend. I can tell. You are super excited about having these little segments at the beginning.
I haven't been this excited about something since the word freebooting took off. Did you see that that link the other day where it's now in the Urban Dictionary and yes. I was quoted in quote marks about saying it like I was a source of information.
Yes, not only a source, but you were basically the original source of this use of the word. So I thought that's very well done to get into the Urban Dictionary like that. Urban Dictionary might be the stepping stone to the Oxford English Dictionary, and so this is the start of that quote's illustrious travel through the world of respectable citations.
Wow. I mean, obviously the word already exists. I mean, I've appropriated it for other purposes, but if we could make it to that, that would be the proudest thing that has ever happened to me, other than getting into the Guinness Book of Records. Nothing will ever top that. But Oxford English Dictionary would be a close second. I mean, they're the two most important books in the world, surely. Guinness Book of Records and the dictionary.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly think of anything more important than that. Now, what was it? The Guinness? Was it the pi thing? Was that
no, it was the world's smallest periodic table.
Oh, right. The world's smallest periodic table is what you.
But that's probably a topic for a whole episode one day because it's just such a good story.
Okay. We'll save that. But
save it.
Curious listeners can go find that out. I'm sure on one of the many channels. Just go to Brady's channel, search through several thousand videos, and eventually you will find it.
Yeah, just watch all of them, and you'll come across it eventually. We've got some follow up.
Okay, follow up.
Now I know you don't want to talk too much more about teaching, but you're going to have to.
Okay. Why do I have to?
So, you may remember in episode 9 I mentioned my sister is a sort of a teacher and she's quite high up in the teaching world these days. She's pretty important. And she had a listen to episode 9, and she has also listened to episode 10 now.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to share some of her thoughts.
Okay.
I would say she wasn't massively happy with everything you said.
Uh-huh.
And the funny thing was, the day I sent it to her, she had just come back from, I wrote this down, the World Education Summit. She had just been like with all the world's best teachers and all the people who think teaching's really, really important. So I think she was on a real high and feeling really good about teaching.
Yeah. Is she going to be recommending me as a speaker at one of their future conferences, perhaps?
The funny thing was, she even said in her email, I can't believe I've even used Gray's videos in the classroom.
Oh no.
So she's used your UK one a few times in lessons and that, but I think she might put an end to that now. No, anyway, she was good spirited about it, but she did feel pretty passionately and sent me a bit of a ranty email. And she agreed with a few things, she disagreed with a few things, and there was one thing she was particularly passionate about, and that was when you kind of said that teachers are sort of scared, or it's sort of an unwritten rule that you don't talk about students not being bright or, not being particularly capable. And, beyond being able to attain certain levels. And she said teachers do talk about that, and it's actually very important that they do talk about it, and it's one of the most important things they do, this kind of differentiation. And not only using data, but teachers should always be talking about what they think students are capable of and what their abilities are, so they can ensure that they are not underperforming. Even the ones who aren't going to become brain surgeons, they need to make sure that people are attaining what they're capable of attaining, whether or not it is academic greatness or just quite a low level. And teachers are always talking about the abilities of their students and who's good at what.
Yeah, there's two little things here. The first is that again, like we discussed in the previous episode, it's hard. You can't go back and edit what you were saying. I sort of tried to make it clear there, but maybe it didn't come across. When teachers talk amongst themselves, obviously they talk about, boy, that kid is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. That is standard kind of teacher talk. What I was trying to get at a little bit is there's sometimes pressure from not the teacher level, but the management level of refusing to acknowledge, shall we say, the limits of some children from the managerial level. And that's kind of the pressure that I was referring to.
I mean, my sister is at that management level, so
there. Okay.
but she felt strongly. She felt differently, but she wasn't a manager at the school you were at. So the another thing I brought up with her was your PG. Is it PGCE? The conversion to become a teacher.
PGCE.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mentioned that, and she your experience of that, and how kind of the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed contenders were often the ones who fell away, while the hard-bitten cynics like you were the ones who went on to actually become teachers. And one of the things she said a really important part of that course is where you are placed and what mentors you're given. And a lot of those bright-eyed people are thrown into some real lions' dens, particularly London schools, or given shoddy mentors. And that is probably the most important thing, she said, when people are coming up through the ranks to become a teacher, what they're exposed to and who they're given at that important time.
Oh man,
very important.
I will agree with that 100%. I did say it a little bit in the previous episode, but I have to say, when I went through the PGC course, there were two mentors in particular that I had, one at the university and then one who was at the first school that I taught at. And I think it is very, very unlikely that I might have made it through that course without their support. So yeah, those people mattered quite a lot, the mentors that I was with. So I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue that at all. And obviously, I don't know the schools that everybody else went to, but I was at schools with some of the other students who were on that university course with me as well. But yeah, especially once you get to a school and you're teaching for the first time, the person that you're with then is incredibly important, because yes, those first few lessons can be quite crushing. I remember my first chemistry lesson was just incredibly devastating, and my mentor just handled it perfectly by just treating it as that's the way it always is, right? The first time, it is just always a disaster, and let's talk about the next
Right.
time. And that, that's the perfect kind of attitude to take. So yeah, I owe a lot to my first two mentors in my PGC
Another
program.
thing we didn't discuss, and my sister reminded me of a couple of funny stories from our family. One in particular I'll share because I really enjoy it, and that's the issue of motivation for students. My mother, I should say, was a very good student. Her sister, my auntie, was not a very good student, and was always bottom of the class. But she was obsessed with horses, that she would run around the schoolyard pretending to be a horse, or she would put a blanket over the front fence of the house and just sit on the blanket and pretend she was riding a horse. And all she...
At what age
Oh, I
was
don't know.
this?
For the sake of the story, I'll say 19 because it'll be funny, but I'm sure she was a little girl.
Okay.
Anyway, she really wanted a horse. What little girl doesn't want a horse? There was no chance she was going to get one. Their father, my grandpa, said to her one year, if you come top of the class, I'll buy you a horse. Confident in the knowledge there was no chance she would ever come top of the class. I think you know what happened next.
Yeah, the only reason you're telling the story is because of what probably happened.
She put
next.
her head down, she worked like a Trojan, and came top of the class. And my completely flabbergasted grandfather had to buy her a horse. Next year, bottom of the class again. And for the rest of the school years, bottom of the class.
What would have been great motivation is, I bought you the horse, but to keep the horse from the glue factory, you need to stay at the top of the class. I bet she wouldn't see. This was a ill-reasoned contract here, because he didn't expect that this was going to ever happen. But I bet maybe if the glue factory was on the horizon, she would have still been top of the class.
Let me read what my sister wrote at the end of her email, just so we've got something on the record in our podcast. She said, I've worked for 12 years in tough areas in the UK, South London, and I loved it. I love inspiring students to achieve more than others think they can be. As a side note, she pointed out some of them who've just become, the pizza delivery people or something, but that's more than what was expected of them. A lot of them have become the first in their family to go into further education. I'm very lucky to get up in the morning, and I love my job, and I know it will be different every day. Whatever people say about teachers, nothing beats all those Facebook messages and notes I get all the time from ex-students saying, thank you very much, you believed in me, and you've changed my life. So,
Good.
There we go. Now, we've got a few links here. One of them was an article that I think I sent you after seeing it on the BBC News website, which was about the hours that teachers work.
Yes, you sent that to me, and I was just looking it over before the show.
I was flabbergasted by this. I can't believe that those numbers are accurate.
Okay, so do you have the summary there? Do you want to tell the listeners what they were
For
talking about?
secondary head teachers, which I guess is the top of the heap in terms they're the boss, aren't they? 63.3 hours per week.
Yeah, and for our American listeners, that's basically the equivalent of the principal of the high school, is what they're talking about, a secondary head.
Primary classroom teachers, 59.3 hours. Secondary school teachers in the classroom, 55.7 hours per week. These are long hours. Is this true?
Well, yes. Before we started, you were doubting the veracity of these numbers, and why do you doubt these numbers?
Well, because they're very long hours. My mum was a school teacher. I lived with my mum, so it's not like I have not been exposed to working school teachers. And yeah, she did work at home. Sometimes she had to work at night, marking things, and I don't know, it just seems like a lot of hours. Because 8 hours a day would be 40 hours a week. To have to add another 20 hours means you're having to do another 4 hours every night and every day of the week. I don't know. I don't want to make the teachers angry at me.
You want to make them angry at me. You want me to say the things that I know you might agree with off air, but you want me to say them on air.
Look, these numbers have come from a survey that's been run by the Department for Education.
Yeah.
This is where it's come from. I'm sure we'll put a link in the show notes. You were a teacher. How many hours a week were you working?
So this is the key question here is partly how or who are they surveying? So I will say that here, my experience beginning as a teacher was that my first year, I would say I was probably working more than 60 hours a week as a teacher my first year.
Right.
But that's because teaching is a job that comes with a lot of overhead and infrastructure that needs to be set up. So you're going through the lessons for the first time. There's so much more to do. And I would say near almost every waking hour of some sort in the first academic year was spent working towards teaching at some point. It was just terrible, and I had a little friend at my first school who was also in her first year as a teacher. I forget what the proper term is. It's your new NQT. So you're a newly qualified teacher, but you have this like probationary year, and so we were NQTs together, and that was also very helpful for staying in the job, to have somebody else who was going through it at the same time as I was. We would sometimes talk about the horrors of, you spend all day at school and you spend all evening preparing for stuff, and since I know everybody loves to hear about dreams, this might be the one time in life, or at least mention dreams. The horror of it is when your whole life is obsessed by something, your brain only has one thing to work with for dreams at night. And so I would end up dreaming about teaching, and then wake up in the morning and have this awful feeling like I felt like I just worked for 8 hours, but I haven't. And now I need to get up and go do it. And it's a very trying time for newly qualified teachers, is that first year. So
Yeah.
if I was designing a survey where I want to make sure I get those numbers as high as possible, I would try to survey teachers who were as new as possible.
Right.
Because that drop off is very quick.
It's front loaded.
It's very front loaded.
And then, so in subsequent years, you start recycling worksheets and lesson plans. And
so in subsequent years, you start recycling. I mean, let's just round it off here. Let's say it's 55, 60 hours. I would say that this number was more accurate for my second year as a teacher. You know, sort of dropping it down. And then, again, I'm trying to live censor my thoughts here, but how far do I want to go? Let's just here's after your second year, everything is not brand new. There's two paths maybe that teachers start to take, and this is not necessarily a teacher-specific problem. I think this is a kind of knowledge economy problem. Many people, even yourself and myself, have jobs where it's hard to pinpoint when something is done. Right? What does finished actually look like? And so for your videos, you can always make the editing a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
Or for my videos, I could always research them a little bit more. And teaching is a job that has an endless amount of boundaries that are like this. You can always mark a paper a little bit more thoroughly. You can always spend a little bit more time preparing the next lesson.
You do have a deadline though, don't you? Like, you have to eventually give the lesson at a set time, in a set room, in a set...
Yeah, there are deadlines, but I think there are too many decisions with a lot of the kind of work for a teacher that can stretch. You are definitely making things better. And this is where there are super dedicated teachers who both mark papers incredibly thoroughly, or I think, for example, the thing that I hated the most as a teacher was writing up profiles of students for Americans, like the report card. But there would have to be a long comment at the bottom, with all sorts of remarks about how the student was doing in the class. And from my perspective as a physics teacher, it's sort of like the only thing I care about is the number on the test, right? Like all of the rest of it is sort of irrelevant in a physics class. But so those profiles, for example, are something that you can spend an enormous amount of time on, and you can make profiles very good and very in-depth. So because there's a lot of that kind of work, I think there is room to always be legitimately making your stuff better, but it can end up just sucking an enormous amount of time out of your life. And if you, this is, oh man, I wish I could edit this next sentence that I'm going to say, but I'll just try to do my best.
Alright, if people hear a big blank here, it means you edited it out.
Yeah. Let's see how to put this. If you think that you are genuinely making a difference in students' lives, it is not an unreasonable calculation to spend an enormous amount of time trying to make everything that relates to your teaching better. Again, it's a rational decision to improve things, to spend an extra hour making something 5% better.
Yeah.
That's not crazy if you're starting from the proposition that you are genuinely influencing the rest of someone's life.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge upside. And so, your investment of time now pays dividends over the lifetime of an entire other human being. And so that's why I don't necessarily doubt these numbers.
Well, I mean, I always, if you ever ask someone how many hours a week they work, I think you should always subtract 5 immediately, just for people inflating their own.
Yeah, it's that's true. People, if it's a self-survey, you're overestimating, just by natural. But I don't. These numbers don't strike me as wildly potentially off. They don't strike me as just totally crazy, because I think as we can kind of see. Well, yeah. The question is, like, what kinds of people are teachers? Do teachers think they're making differences in students' lives? I would say, if you ask teachers, it seems that the answer is generally yes. And so it's not unreasonable to spend a lot of additional voluntary time on that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't questioning that kind of motivation from them. I was just more amazed by the number of hours. But then again, when I was a boy playing cricket and computer games all day, I was probably blissfully ignorant to the 10 hours a night my mum spent slaving over tests and writing lesson plans. So I apologise to her and to all the other teachers, because it sounds like they are working those hours. There are a couple of little minor things I had here in the follow-up on the notes that we made before. One was a talk by Brian Kaplan, which I think you were going to raise.
Oh yeah. I just want to mention it to listen to someone basically give a better explanation than I gave about the importance of what's called signaling in education. So this is the guy I mentioned. He's an economist who I was talking about some of his work about predicting graduation rates from university based on what you know about a student going into university. And someone in the Reddit flagged this up. He was on a podcast called Econ Talk recently. And it's a podcast that is run by an economist who interviews other economists. I'm a subscriber. I do quite like it. And it's an excellent podcast because you get to listen to people who maybe you don't agree with explain themselves in full, which is rare in the world sometimes. I'm just going to put the link in the show notes. If you want to hear more from the professional economist side about how signaling works and research into what is the intrinsic value of schools, you can follow this link in the show notes. Go listen to that episode. I think it's probably about an hour or so long discussion, and I just think it's worth following up on.
Or if you prefer just to hear two amateurs who have absolutely no qualification in economics do it, keep listening to Hello Internet.
Yes, that's exactly right. If you want to hear two dudes just kind of like talk about whatever, like, oh, I was a teacher once, and here's my anecdotal thoughts.
Yeah, my mum was a teacher when I was a little boy, so let me preach to you about what it's like to be a teacher.
Yeah, my anecdotal experience, it counts for nothing in the world of science, but I guess if you want to hear it, this is the place for you. Hello, Internet. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website, portfolio, or online store. Squarespace has been around for 10 years, and they're constantly improving their platform with new features, new designs, and even better support. They have beautiful designs for you to start with, and they have a ton of style options so you can create a unique experience for you or your business. And they've released 20 new customizable templates this past year, and every design automatically includes a mobile experience that matches the overall style of your website, so your content looks great on every device, every time. Squarespace is easy to use with simple drag and drop tools, but if you need help, Squarespace has an amazing support team that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I can verify just how amazing they are. And the new Squarespace Metric app for iPad and iPhone allows you to check website stats like page views, unique visitors, and social media followers. and make text updates and drag and drop images and changes to layouts and comments on the go. And I have to say, I just recently had an experience of being able to use the Squarespace iPhone app, which I had never installed before, but on the last podcast, I had put it up online and there were a few errors in the text description, little typos that I needed to fix, and a couple links that I had forgotten to include, and one link that went to the wrong place. And I happened to be on the road when the podcast went live, so I could see comments coming in telling me about the things that I needed to fix, and I only had my iPhone with me, so I took it out, I installed the Squarespace app, logged in with my regular Hello Internet credentials, took 2 seconds, I could see all the blog posts, and while I was on a bus in London, I could fix all the things that I needed to fix. And it was just an amazingly simple and great experience, and I didn't have to have it on the back of my mind all day that I hadn't included what I needed to include. So that little app is definitely a must-have under the right circumstances. So Squarespace is good for everyone, whether you need a simple website solution or you're a developer and want to get into the code. There are so many options, and it starts at just $8 a month and includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. So start a trial with no credit card required and build your website today. And when you decide to use Squarespace for real, which you definitely will because they're so good, make sure to use the offer code HelloInternet, all one word, to get 10% off and to show your support for this podcast. Also, there's a link in the description that is at squarespace.com/HelloInternet, which can get you that same 10% discount that you can click. So once again, we thank Squarespace for their support. Squarespace, everything you need to create an exceptional website.
We've also had an artist at work in the Reddit, I understand.
Yes, I wanted to put together Tao McCrawley, I think is the way to say it, is a fan on the Reddit and also on Twitter. I'm assuming it's a he, but I'm not 100% sure. You never know on the internet. Has been memifying the podcast in the most recent episode and putting together just some funny pictures with the stick figure CGP Grey and then a summary of what I was saying in the episode. So I'll put a link to the one that I like the most from the last episode, which just says, it's a summary of my position from last time. It says, the more you want to be a teacher, the more you won't want to be a teacher, which I thought was a very funny way of summarizing some of the points that I was making last time. So yes, thanks to him.
What was this in the Reddit about hunt and peck?
Someone asked if you were a hunt and peck typist. Is that the case, Brady? I'm guessing that they thought so based on that little moment where we could hear you typing.
Ah, see, I thought they were just casting aspersions on me that I would just be that type of person, but they were basing it on evidence.
And as soon as I saw that question, I thought, it did seem to take him a long time to type whatever he was typing. Are you a hunt and peck typist?
What do you think? Like, from what you know of me?
Here's the problem. I always just assume that everyone can touch type. And I'm always surprised to discover people who cannot touch type. So I would just, without even thinking of it, just assume that you could. But I feel a strong moment of doubt here that you are not a touch typist. But you would have to be, since you worked at a newspaper and you had to write quickly. So my emotions are thinking maybe you're not a touch typist, but my logical guess would be that you are. So which half of me is wrong here?
Gray, you should always trust your feelings and emotions.
Oh, is that the lesson I'm learning today?
Yeah, that's the lesson. Go with your heart, not your head. I am a hunt and pecker.
I cannot believe that. I cannot believe that.
Trust your feelings. They do you justice.
Oh, God, how do you survive in the world?
Do you know what? I'm doing it right, aren't I?
I mean,
I get by.
I guess. You do get by just fine. But now, every time we instant message back and forth, I'm going to have to feel sorry for you. Oh, he's there trying to find, the letter S on the keyboard.
I know where it is. I know where the S is. It's up I know the general area. And then once my hand's moving in that general direction, light travels very fast.
But so you're looking at the keyboard while you're typing?
Yes.
That's sad.
Why? What are you doing? Like reading a book or something?
I'm looking at the screen while I'm typing.
Oh, I know what's on the screen because it's the buttons I'm pressing down on the keyboard.
When you say it like that, it's hard to argue it.
Thank you.
Interesting. I learned something new about you today.
Yeah, you just think that little bit less of me.
I
Just
am
gradually eroding. I'm definitely eroding quicker than I'm building. I've noticed that.
I am slightly disappointed, I must admit.
Speaking of pecking and clicking and things like that, I just wanted to quickly clarify. Well, not clarify. I just wanted to round off a point I started making in Brady's paper cuts
Mhm.
in the last episode, which was about mouse clicking
Mhm.
that I was hearing on radio shows. The reason I wanted to bring it up was partly because this has become a problem with the advent of digital radio, which is something I didn't get across. I do most of my radio listening in the car, and I've always had pretty crummy analog radios, and I've only got a digital radio in my car for the first time recently,
Mhm.
and that has opened up this world of distracting noises and mouse clicking. So it's not always great. It's not all positives. It's not always good to hear everything. And you know, it's the same with HD TV. Like, everyone's all HD TV is wonderful, but there are a whole bunch of TV shows and problems and things that have come along as a result of that. Like, I know the fake blood they were using in TV shows had to be sort of completely changed because all of a sudden blood didn't look real anymore on HD TVs. And a whole bunch of sets for TV shows had to be rebuilt because little joins and seams and things they used to get away with on children's TV shows were suddenly these glaring problems. Sometimes less is more.
I just, I don't get it. Well, if you like analog radio so much, can't you still listen to analog radio? Can't you get rid of your fancy digital radio player?
That would be cool. Like, people start taking their cars to like audio shops saying, "Can you get this like really expensive XM radio out and chuck in a..."
Is that not a possibility? I know nothing about cars.
Well, of course I'm not going to do that, and you do.
But why are you not going to do that? Because the digital one is better?
Because you hear the voice more clearly.
Oh, so it is better.
There are pluses and minuses.
Okay, no, I'm not going to let you get away with this, right? This drives me crazy. People always go, oh, there's pluses and minuses. Yes, but almost never do the pluses and minuses in any situation balance perfectly.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean I can't whinge about the minuses.
I know that you will whinge about the minuses, but when you say, oh, it's not always better, what you really mean is, oh, there's still some negative aspect that I don't like.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that it's a new negative aspect. Isn't that interesting? That it's not like they didn't quite make it better by enough. It's a whole new problem came along. I find that fascinating.
I know we're doing a show here, and so I should have something to talk about. But I feel like my brain just has no response to this line of reasoning from you. It's just.
Well, that's because I'm completely correct. You can't disagree with me. If you disagreed, you would certainly say something.
No, I feel like, of course, there's going to be new problems with new technology.
So we agree.
Yes, but your new problems are always better than your old problems. It's like,
that's interesting. That's a broad statement.
Well, I'm going to say with regards to technology that is generally true.
All technological advances are positive, is what you're saying.
I would say that. See, this is the debating problem here because right, you only need to find one counter example here.
Like a nuclear bomb.
Well,
I know you could argue for a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. But what I say is the here's the way I would look at it is that it's that you have to look at the sum value of the progress, and so I think at any particular stage, certain elements of progress have negative features, but in general, when you're summing up the pluses and the minuses, the pluses just clearly win out all the time. That's what I would say.
So the world is a better place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I can't remember. I saw some infographic on Reddit a little while ago. I think it was from the Gates Foundation. It was a graphic showing how people die around the world.
Yeah.
Just globally. And the interesting thing was to see in the first world kind of areas, you're talking about death from cancer and heart disease, and there's a discussion in the comments about this, like, oh, why is cancer killing so many people in America? And the answer, like, why does cancer kill so many people, is because malaria doesn't kill so many people, right? Like as you solve certain kinds of problems, you're going to have
Yeah.
new problems. That is just the way the world works. But I still say, on balance, your new problems are problems you would much rather have than your old problems.
So you think if there was some way to measure like the happiness of people or of society, and you applied that now, it would come out, it would constantly be rising. Like someone in the 1800s or the mid 1900s is less happy
Now, see, this
than
is.
we are.
I might just add this to be the topic, depending on how long we talk about this. This something that drives me crazy. Happiness is so tricky, and I'm always just kind of appalled by people who think backwards in time and imagine how great it was back then, with their outhouses and their cholera, because it was a simpler life.
Yeah, but I get annoyed by people like you who say because they went outside to go to the toilet and didn't have an iPad, they're not capable of being as happy as I am.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think humans have a natural bias to think that they used to be happier than they actually were. And this is also just within a single human lifetime as well.
I think there's a bias the other way. But you're right, and that's why we have terms like the good old days.
Yeah.
But there's also a real bias to think because we live longer and because we have mobile phones, we're like somehow superior or better than people who are only in black and white photos and are dead now.
Well, I mean, being alive is superior to being dead. I think that's hard to argue.
It has its plus points.
Yeah, it does have its plus
It has
points.
pluses and minuses.
Yeah, I guess it does. Oh, God.
It's alright.
It's like you hurt me with it. But no, I think
What did you say?
it's like your line of reasoning sometimes physically hurts me. And I know you do. Sometimes you do it just to rile me, or at least
No.
that's what I tell myself. But no, people just tend to think that they used to be happier than they currently are, and there's some. Again, this is where running a podcast like this, we weren't intending on talking about this. I can't possibly research all these things, but I have looked at some in the past some interesting research about happiness, and it seems like this is a hot topic in psychology now. I don't know if that's actually the case, but there are just some very interesting experiments that show how people's self-assessment of their current happiness can be just weirdly off from how they report their actual level of happiness. And the way I've seen these things are usually with people participating in the study will be text messaged randomly, and they'll have to rate on a scale, from 1 to 5, how happy they actually feel at that particular moment. And you compare that with self-reported descriptions of their happiness later about that actual time, and you can see that there's like a big difference between the reported happiness and then the measured happiness. And that the biggest difference I saw in this one, which again made people dislike me a lot, is talking about new parents, so parents of new babies.
Yeah.
And that
As opposed to parents of old babies.
I guess what I mean is first time parents is what I was trying to say there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like you had your first kid. The reported happiness later just does not match at all the data at the time. So if you randomly ask in the first year new parents how happy they are, you always get a like, oh God, I'm so tired, and my whole life it just seems like it's falling apart and everything is miserable.
Yeah.
And then, but 6 months later, if you ask someone, oh, how happy were you? Like, oh, it was a magical time, and there are all these new, all these new experiences, and everybody does this with all kinds of things. I think this is also why people remember, past periods in their life as happier than they currently are. And an interesting thing as well is that people's level of happiness doesn't really change very much over the course of their life. And so their self-description is weirdly out of whack with what we sort of know about people's levels of happiness, is that they don't change all that much, but people have a real perception that they're variable. So I think that history on this whole scale kind of follows the same way, that people imagine how amazingly happy people were in the past, and the answer is like people in the past probably actually weren't that differently happy from people now, but they had just worse problems to deal with.
Yeah,
So
they were
that's-
dying of cholera, whereas I'm complaining about mouse clicks on
That's it.
talk show radio.
Oh, the audio fidelity on my digital radio is too high. That's it's just terrible.
Oh,
But
what perfection. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. And meanwhile, 200 years ago, you have people needing to give birth to 10 children so that 2 of them will live, right? Like this is, but the actual random happiness of individuals might not have been wildly different. I don't know. I don't know if there's any, or if it could even be done, any kind of guesstimating about people's happiness in the past. I don't know if you could try to do an analysis of letters or literature or anything like that. But yeah. Anyway, I'm always technology. Give me more, faster, sooner.
This one's just for you, Gray. You ready? This is for you.
What? There you go.
That's the end of follow-up. Oh, I went and did something. Oh, you would have hated my Easter. Because we spent 2 solid days going through antique shops, which is like one of my favourite things in the world to do. Just looking at old stuff and little knickknacks and treasures and old furniture and old maps, and I love all that stuff.
I know you do, and you misunderstand me. Under certain circumstances, I could find that sort of activity enjoyable. But the question is, were you going into these shops looking to purchase items to bring back to the mausoleum of your life?
Yes, they were shops. They weren't museums. They're antique shops. I mean, there is a lot of just looking, and isn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to buy a few things. Bought a couple
You
of
don't.
those.
You don't actually have to buy a few things. I have been in shops many a time and not bought a few things. It's remarkably easy to do.
Well, you have better discipline than me. If I see something lovely, I'm like, oh, that would just be lovely just to have. Just to have near me.
Just to have. Just
Yeah.
to have.
Yeah.
As a burden.
It's not a burden.
How many square feet is your house, if you want to say that?
The main thing stopping me is the fact I have absolutely no idea.
That's okay. I have no idea either.
Yeah.
I just feel like this is a thing that some people
So
know.
if I'd said a number, what would it have meant to you?
It would have meant nothing, but I felt like maybe the listeners could have some estimate of how much stuff could possibly fit in a house that is that big. I don't
You
know.
could probably fit a lot of stuff in my house at the moment, but yeah.
Well, you have fit a lot of stuff in your house at the moment.
Hmm.
You sent me that picture, and I could see all the antlers on your wall and things like that. And again, I want to once again just be super clear. I have no problem with someone having antlers in their home, because your home should be a place that you like, and I want you to have a place that you like, Brady.
It's hard to like though when you're like making little jokes about it.
No, you.
It's okay. You must. If you ever, I tell you what, all will be forgiven if you ever actually agree just to come over for the day and hang out.
I totally will. It's just a question of getting up there. But
We've already said we're going to go to the tip together and
yes,
throw stuff out.
and apparently you have plans to make a video for our exciting day to the tip.
No, I haven't. No, someone suggested it, but
Oh, okay,
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to make a video. I think that would be nice. Maybe we could do a podcast from the tip.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure people would love that.
I'd be well up for that. That'd be fun.
Mhm. But okay, but I just want to be clear. I do not judge other people's design aesthetics. It's just if you're asking me questions about
You so do. You did a whole thing with a picture where you put circles around all the things that you thought were rubbish in their house.
because but the context of that was, boy, look at this beautiful house that they ruined with all of these things.
Okay, so you don't
And-
judge, but you say they ruined their house.
But the presumption is it's ruined for me, right? Like if
Okay.
I were to live here, all of those circles are the things that I would just get rid of. But like I feel like I have I'm a very easygoing, live and let live kind of guy. If you're doing something and that thing makes you happy, if it's decorating your house with stuff from all of your trips, who's gonna argue with that? If you're happy, if you're happy, it's your house. That's awesome. Like that's great. And I can I'll visit your house and like tell me about your stuff. What's the story behind these antlers? What's the deal with these little statues on the fireplace? That's all great. It's just a different question of if I were to buy your house
Okay.
and you left all that stuff there, how much of it would I keep?
I don't think it's not criticising to couch it in the terms you just couched it in. I still think it is criticising.
No, it's just people have a difference of opinion. And plus, I don't go into people's homes and start pointing at all the things and going like, oh man, I get rid of all this stuff, right? This has only come up on the podcast because I think you asked about it, or I don't even remember how it came up, but like this is a topic of discussion here. But I don't go into someone's house and start downvoting all of their personal possessions. That's not the way it works.
What if would you come to an antique shop? Do you ever go into antique shops?
Yeah. Like
You treat them like little museums.
Yeah, I treat them like little museums, but I mean, I've done a couple of road trips across America, and there's always just quirky, weird local shops or antique stuff like that. I have no problem going and visiting that stuff and taking a look around. I think it's super interesting, but I'm the guy in the store with no intention to actually purchase anything.
Have you ever bought something crazy, like some weird object, even if you regretted it afterwards?
I need more context for this. Like, what do you mean?
Like, have you ever bought what you would describe as a knick-knack or a novelty item or an old item?
I guess when I was a kid, I did stuff like that. You have stuff that's just totally worthless. But you're also a kid. Like you don't know anything as a kid. But I think in my adult life, I'm trying to look around the room that I'm in.
Have you ever bought something as an adult that, to borrow a term from last time, you regretted? Have you ever made a bad purchase?
No, never. I can't feel like there's any regret that I've had over purchases.
Really? You've never regretted a purchase?
This is going to get quickly back into our weird definition of regret.
Okay, yeah, with data available at the time.
Yeah, it's like I have bought stuff that doesn't work out, but I don't know, filled with regret and sit down and feel all sad about it. So like, well, that didn't work, and now I'm going to get rid of this thing because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I'm looking around. I mean, like this bothers you, and
no more than you're bothered by my hunting and pecking typing.
that's just surprise mixed with disappointment, I guess.
I just feel like maybe you're missing out on some of the texture of life.
I am very happy with my life, Brady.
As long as you're happy and it's good for you.
Yeah, see, that's exactly it. Live and let live. I'm a very happy guy. You're a very happy guy, I presume. We're both very happy guys, and if for some crazy reason we were renting a house together, we would then have to have some disagreements over how that house would be decorated.
Man.
Actually, no, that'd be really easy. You can decorate your room the way you want, and all the common areas are decorated the way I want. I think that would settle it. That'd be great.
You sound like a wife. Are you ready for Brady's paper cuts?
Oh, am I ever? The digital radio thing wasn't your paper cut? That was clarification.
That was last week's paper cut.
Oh, God. It's expanding. Paper Cuts has its own follow-up now.
It's going to be a breakaway podcast, you know it. So, here is my paper cut this week.
Yeah.
It is when you unfollow someone on Twitter, and they have whatever software or gimmicks that people have to know that you've done this, they then contact you and confront you about why you unfollowed them.
Really? Yeah. Have you had this happen to you?
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
I complained about it on a podcast.
This is your solution.
Well, I don't know. If it depends on the reason I unfollowed them.
There are many reasons on Twitter to unfollow someone.
I know, and it's not. Sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes it's just managing certain things. And I mean, one of the ones I unfollowed recently was simply a case of just management. I was unfollowing them from one account, but I still followed them from a different account, and I just didn't want them clogging like multiple streams. But sometimes you unfollow someone because they're a bit too active and they're crowding out your Twitter stream. And but anyway, I don't think one should be confronted about it.
This is the Twitter versus Facebook topic, and I this is the reason I love Twitter is because it is not Facebook. It doesn't come with any of the, or at least I don't think it should, but apparently some people do. It doesn't come with the kind of social obligations that Facebook does. Excuse me. That none of this expectations that people in real life or your work colleagues or everybody uses you on Facebook. Whereas with Twitter, it's you're following people who you think are interesting to follow for whatever reason, but it's not a list of your friends on Twitter. That's one of the reasons why I really like it.
There you go.
So
There's my paper cup.
yeah, I'd be pretty baffled if I unfollowed someone and they got mad about it. I'd be like,
I'd be mad if you unfollowed me.
yeah, but see, here's one of the great things about Twitter is that for those kinds of relationships, I could just mute you on Twitter as well if I wanted to make it look like I was still following you and then
You
not
could
actually follow you.
hypothetically mute
Yeah, hypothetically I could mute you. That's entirely true.
I would not be upset if you unfollowed me, Gray. I know it wouldn't be personal.
Yeah, but that
Robots don't have feelings.
But that is the essence of Twitter, and I think particularly on Twitter, I think I have more people I don't know who I follow on Twitter than people I do know that I follow on Twitter, and there's no way I would make Twitter just a list of my friends. That just ruins the whole use of it. That's not what it's for. So yeah, if I guess for future notice, if I ever unfollow someone and then they start talking to me about it, it's not Facebook. Go cry about this on Facebook, but not here. This is not what this thing is for.
Plane crash corner. Do you want a plane crash corner? I deliberately left a pause there so it's easier for you to edit this out.
Do you honestly have something to talk about plane crash wise?
Well, I just want to keep it going. So I was actually going to delve into the vault of plane crashes.
No, it doesn't have to be a weekly thing.
Ah.
It can be a semi-regular thing.
I wanted to tell you about the worst plane crash ever.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Do you know
what?
about it? Do you know what the worst plane crash ever was?
I have no idea, no.
Really?
This is where you're super into a topic and you over-assume other people's knowledge about it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have the slightest idea.
I just assume this is like one everybody knows.
I don't think I could name a single plane crash in an identifying way. Where people say, "Oh, flight
Yeah.
AA165." I can't do that for a single plane crash.
Well, if you say the word Tenerife to any plane crash enthusiast, they're going to know what you're talking about straight away.
I have never heard of this.
Well, this was the worst plane crash ever.
All right,
So I'll give you.
You might as well.
I mean, you can cut this. Just send me the audio for my personal pleasure, listening pleasure. Like all plane crashes, it's a terrible thing, and 583 people died, which is the most in a single plane crash.
Mm-hmm.
But it was two 747s that hit each other on the runway, and you'd actually quite like it because it was one of these perfect storms of things going wrong. But a lot of it was also to do with psychology and human interaction. Because basically, this guy flying a KLM plane at the end of the runway was quite misty. He misheard some communication, and he thought he was clear to take off, and he was impatient and wanted to take off because he wanted to get home. He was late, and his second officer, his inferior, was probably the first officer actually, but his inferior knew he was doing the wrong thing, but was too shy almost. He was too. He didn't say it. He was
right.
He didn't speak up. Anyway, you can guess the rest. The plane went hurtling down the runway through the mist, and there was another Pan Am plane crossing the runway at the time, and the KLM plane took off, and the two collided, and all this devastation happened. Not only is it interesting because it's the worst plane crash, but it's interesting because of some of the factors, especially this human factor side of things, and this was the crash that really started getting people interested in human factors and the psychology of the cockpit.
Yeah, if it's a huge disaster, it's almost always a human's fault.
There were lots of factors, but if you were going to put the blame on one human, you'd put it on the pilot of this KLM plane. And the thing that was interesting was that he was like the chief flight instructor and like the top dog pilot of the whole airline. And he'd recently been in their advertising campaign as the face of the airline. And when the crash happened, the first thing all the airline executives said was, we got to get Jacob on the phone, he's going to head the investigation, before they realised that he was the pilot that had caused the crash. So anyway, interesting one, plane crash corner, look it up. And like I always say, every plane crash has lots of interesting little stories and bits of trivia, and one of my favourites is this particular plane, the Pan Am plane, that kind of was the sitting duck that got hit by the KLM as it came down the runway,
Mm-hmm.
was also the first ever 747 to fly a commercial flight, and it was the first ever 747 to be hijacked, and it then was one of the participants in the worst air disaster still that has ever happened. So
busy airplane then.
that's a cursed plane.
Yeah,
Plane crash
cursed.
corner.
There we go.
You can just send me that audio if it doesn't make the final cut.
If the worst plane crash disaster ever doesn't make it, nothing from this point on will make it.
This episode of Hello Internet has been brought to you by Harrys.com, and for those of you who don't know what Harry's is, it's basically an online way to take care of your sort of shaving and razor needs. You can buy razors and you can buy the replacement blades. Now the business was born out of a personal experience. One of the founders went along to what he calls a drugstore, but I guess what I would call the pharmacy or a chemist, to buy replacement blades for his razor, and he had to wait for ages while they unlocked a case and then paid a fortune for the blades, and he basically thought, there's got to be a better way than this. So they started this website, Harrys.com, where you buy razors and then you get the replacement blades like everyone does, but at a much fairer price than what you get from some of the more famous companies. Now you're probably wondering why I'm doing this ad and not Gray, and that's because I've actually been sent one of the kits from Harry's to use, so I can tell you about it. I've got it here in my hand. That's what it sounds like. You'll have to go to the website to see what it looks like. I was actually really impressed by the whole thing. It comes in a really sort of impressive looking box, really classy. Now I'll open it up. The razor itself's really nice. The one I've got's got this nice silver metal handle. It feels expensive, although it's not, and it looks expensive. It's quite a classy looking razor. It also comes with shaving cream and a first batch of blades, which is pretty important. I gave it a test run in the bathroom and I was really impressed with the shave as well. Nice and smooth. Everything you'd want from a really top-notch razor. But the key thing here is the ability to order new blades at a fair price. They've got really good blades made in Germany, and you can order them when you like, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. They're not following that printer ink business model of getting you on board to start with and then ripping you off later. They're really fair. If you don't believe me, again, have a look at the website, Harrys.com. I think one of the things I like best though is sort of the look of the product, the font and the text. It's all kind of really classy. I like the colours, and I don't know, they've got a bit of a sense of humour. If you look closely and read what's written on some of the products as well, there's kind of a dry wit. I think they've done well. I think they've really got the tone of the product right. Only $15 gets you the starting kit, which seems like a really good price to me. And besides being something you could buy for yourself, which is probably what I'd do, the other thing that did occur to me when it arrived was this would make a really good gift for kind of like your dad or your brother or boyfriend or something like that. It looks like an expensive present, although it doesn't cost a fortune. So go and have a look at the website and you'll see what I mean. So if you want to check it out, go to Harrys.com. Now I should say at the moment they're only delivering to the US and Canada. I was a bit lucky they sent one to me here in the UK, and I think they do want to get international shipping happening at some stage, but they haven't done that yet. Go to Harrys.com and enter the promo code HI when you're checking out. Now if you do that, you'll get $5 off your first order, which is good for you, and they'll know that you came to the website from our podcast, which is good for us. Harrys.com, promo code HI as in Hello Internet, and thanks again to them for supporting Hello Internet and the podcast. Back to the show. God, we've waffled on today.
Have we?
We're going to go for like an hour almost.
Well, I guess what this is the Hello Internet Season 2 opening extravaganza.
Excellent marketing. I've got a lot to learn from you.
It's not waffling. It's an amazing amount of content.
This could be like feature-length episode.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about the news.
Yes.
This is a big topic, and this is going to be difficult because you are a consumer of news, but I worked in news for a very long time.
Yes.
Which really makes me worry that I could be very, very boring here. Even more boring than I am with Plane Crash Corner.
I will edit you out as much as is necessary. This is a topic that we had alluded to at talking about at some point in season 1, and so we'll talk about it in season 2. But I guess the focus for this discussion is a little bit like the news: why is it so awful? ? Right? That's that's kind of the headline in my mind of the discussion to have around this particular topic, because the news is such a big, all-encompassing thing. I think that we want to set the guidelines that I want to talk mostly about sort of the big newspapers and the big TV news channels as the focus of this, because in this modern internet world, there's this very interesting blurring spectrum of what is news with various websites and how big do things need to be. So I kind of want to talk mostly about the major websites and the major TV channels when we're discussing the news today.
I like how you say the major websites rather than newspapers.
Did I say that? I meant to say newspapers, but
you did say newspapers as well.
Yeah, but I guess the thing is, in my mind, I interact with all the newspapers in their internet form. You know, of course, I'm not going to go to the newspaper and like pull out those big sheets and then have to wash my hands later.
I remember when a little while back, I think you and I were both in a newspaper article, like in the paper, and it wasn't in the online version. And I called you up and said, "Oh, have you seen this article that we're in?"
Yeah.
And you were like, "Oh, I can't find it online." And I said, "I'll go and buy the paper because it's in there." And oh my goodness, it was like I asked you to rub your hands in dog poo or something. You were like, "What? I'm not going to touch a newspaper." You were like mortified.
No, okay. So some newspaper had done a big feature on people making a living on YouTube. As I remember correctly, you were in the article, but I don't think I was mentioned. But we wanted to talk about it anyway.
Okay.
You wanted me to look at it, and I guess I was just disbelieving that you couldn't just send me a link, that this was only available on a piece of paper in a store somewhere. And I don't know if I've ever bought a newspaper before then that wasn't explicitly for a project in school back in high school, when they say, oh, you have to use a newspaper to do whatever. And I don't think I'd purchased a newspaper since then. So it was a big event for me, and I had to go in and give the guy some money for some paper. And yes, that was the first time I touched a newspaper in probably 10 years.
Wow.
A physical newspaper, yeah.
So I'm guessing that the overall tone you're going to have towards the big newspapers and the big TV networks is not going to be loving.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I guess I come at this from a couple points, which is, for most people reading the news, you are probably not involved with basically every news story you ever read across your entire life. The news is stuff that's happening to other people or in other places.
Mm.
But if you ever are in the position where you are directly involved with something that ends up in the news, that can be a rather eye-opening experience to see, oh, I was here, or I was involved in this, or maybe the newspaper is talking about the company that I work with, and I'm familiar with whatever they're discussing.
Mm.
And I would say that is often just a very surprising experience to see how stuff that you know about firsthand is then communicated to a wide audience.
Yeah.
Very often it is communicated in ways that are just wildly inaccurate. And like I said, I've seen people discussing this online and just saying how that can be very, very surprising. And that's not something that happens to most people, because again, most of the time the news is about something else. And so when you read newspaper stories or you see something on TV, you generally just kind of go with it, right? You have no reason to doubt it, really. It's in the newspaper, it's on the TV. You assume like, oh yeah, maybe they left out some details, but that's basically the story. But if you're ever involved in something, you can quickly see how that is not the case. That it is often just very different than what you expect.
Yes, I mean that's true for life in general as well. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the second thing is from my perspective, having to research stuff. So yeah, I don't want to make a big point of this, but I do try to research my videos as well as I can.
Yeah.
And over the first year of doing this, I very rapidly came to the conclusion that newspapers were basically just worthless as resources to rely upon, because usually factual claims that were made, if I tried to follow up, it was just either impossible to follow up, or it was just wrong or wildly misleading. And that, that's also a very disappointing kind of thing to come across, because you think this is the newspaper, this is the idea of the newspaper, just like the idea of schools, right, is maybe different from the reality of the situation. Maybe, if we talk about what the news is actually doing, presenting an accurate view of the world to news consumers is not what it's doing. It's actually accomplishing something else. So,
well, I'm
yeah.
As a guy who spent many years writing those stories and then making those TV reports later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I will say nothing, because I think I'm now about to feel how all the teachers have felt listening to the previous few podcasts as you do a demolition job on my profession. But that's okay.
I'm gonna say something, and I think is going to be impossible for this next sentence to not sound sarcastic. So I just want you and the internet to be aware that I mean it genuinely.
Okay.
You, Brady, are very special. I think that you are much better than probably many, say most of your former colleagues. I don't know any of these individuals in particular, but you are someone who has ended up in a situation where in some strange way you are almost like a one-person tiny science news channel of yourself. And you go out and you do interviews, and then you edit those interviews, and you have a lot of control over how things are portrayed. And I think the kind of person who ends up in that situation is obviously maybe a little bit different than most of the other news reporters. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well,
do you
that's
think
very
you're special?
That's very kind of you to say, and I appreciate it. And I guess, in the sense that I'm a journalist now, then that's a bit different, and it's sort of comparing apples with oranges.
Yeah.
I think the side of me that is about to be offended is the side of me that worked for a Rupert Murdoch newspaper for 7 years and then worked for the BBC for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the side of me that's about to get a shellacking.
Well, actually, so here's the thing. Even this is, again, just as I was saying that sentence, that if I was writing this as an article, I know I would go back and revise the previous thing that I said about the reporters themselves, because I actually think, I was thinking a lot about this, because I've had some interactions with reporters who tried to get in touch with me to do stories, or a couple things that have been written about me in the newspapers.
Yeah.
And I would say that it has generally been a negative experience.
Yeah.
For me with that, and it's something I would try to think about and say, okay, I think people are people, just sort of across the board. In general, I don't like answers like this. Say, oh, let's say I think the news is terrible. I think a lazy answer, but a very reflexive answer for people is just say something like, oh, but that's because just the reporters are terrible reporters. I don't think that's a good answer to the kind of question about maybe why isn't the news super accurate. And I like to try to think in terms of systems. And so my guess is that what's going on inside of newspapers and what's going on inside of newsrooms is that the system that is set up to generate and produce the news puts an enormous amount of constraints on the reporters and the writers that makes it difficult for them to maybe necessarily produce the best pieces that they possibly can. So,
yes,
I'll ask you this: I've never worked in a newsroom, but I'm going to guess, for example, that there is just enormous amounts of pressure to produce lots of articles, and you are measured and graded by the number of articles. You're not necessarily measured and graded by the quality of those articles. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're not wrong and cause problems for the newspaper, yes, you are required to produce. You're required to have high output, but also you're required to have output in most cases every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a constraint put in place. It's a you could call it an artificial constraint that is created by the need to have newspapers every day and sell advertising and make money and feed the beast and sate the curiosity of the public. But news isn't news if you don't do it quickly every day. It then becomes history. and they're not called history papers, they're called newspapers. So that constraint that it is done quickly and all of the problems that come with the need to do it quickly, including accuracy and things like that, they're almost a necessary evil. And yes, you cannot then rely on it as a source in 50 years' time for a CGP Grey video, but they're not historical documents in a way. And if every article was triple checked to the nth degree and you waited for all the facts to come to light before you wrote your article, it wouldn't be news anymore. And you could say, and I know there are people who don't care much for news and will say, well, fine, let's wait a few months until all the facts are known. Let's not report on this Malaysia plane crash until we know what happened. Let's not have all this wild speculation. And that's fair enough. Wild speculation is called wild speculation for a reason. But if you don't have news, if you don't have day-to-day accountability, you have a lot of other problems in society as well, to do with the way you're governed, to do with things that are happening you don't know about. So I think we were talking about pluses and minuses of everything. The pluses of news shouldn't be discarded because of some of the minuses that you've already touched upon and will no doubt touch upon again. Let's not forget that news has to be quick and responsive and a day-to-day thing, because that's how people are held accountable and how society is kept informed of what is going on elsewhere in society. Otherwise, we may as well just live in our own little silos and not know anything. But go on anyway. That rant over.
No.
You are making good points. Which
No. That's not a rant. Like this is why I think it's an interesting conversation to have with someone who was on the inside, or because I'm just a person on the outside, sort of frowning at the newspaper, and it's I want to hear what you have to say about your perspective from having actually worked on it on the inside.
I'll say one other thing, and I'll say a negative thing, because that's a kind of a positive, altruistic version of news, and you don't have to have been a journalist to express those thoughts that I just expressed. That's kind of more of a fourth estate, type view. But I think the one thing that I think you're a bit too kind to journalists as well when you sort of say that they're just a product of the machine they work in, which they are, and they have to get paid and don't want to get sacked. But journalists also, most journalists who become journalists have a fair degree of ego, and they want to have stories in the paper all the time. They want to have their byline on stories, or they want to have their face on TV as a reporter. And that is another big driving force that's going on. So while they have got bosses who are saying feed the beast, they also have their own impulses which are saying get the story, get enough of the story, or get the best possible story that will get me onto page one, or get me the lead story on the news tonight. And that is a corrupting force. That is a force where you find out just enough to get your story in the paper, or you find out what you need to know, or the shots you need to get your story on the TV that night. That is a negative side of journalism.
Yeah.
They are just humans. They're humans who who want glory.
Yes, that's true. I mean, that's again, that is also in all fields. That is a human issue. Humans want glory, I guess, as a general statement. I guess when you put it this way.
This is a huge topic. Isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, it's.
Well, what are we even saying? We're just like, it's just massive.
Yeah, it's such a huge topic. I guess let me go to some of my bullet points here.
Okay.
Like one of the things that I think about when I think about the news, sort of like on TV and with newspapers, it's the suspicion of noticing that like the phenomenon of 24-hour news channels. Or so really there's always 24 hours worth of news in a day, or that newspapers are always sort of about the same size, and I think it's like, well, surely if we want to talk about the things that are important, or the things that humans should be informed about in their society, there's not an equal amount of that every day. It would be a remarkable coincidence if the exact number of important things happened every single day. And so since that isn't the case, you have to know that a lot of the stuff that's in on TV news or that is in the newspaper is not necessarily there because it's important. It's there to fill space. I came across this article by a blogger a guy I've been following for years called Paul Graham. He writes some very good essays. He's a venture capitalist out in California, but he used to do some other things. And he talked about how I think it was he worked in a newsroom at one point and was discussing the number of press releases that come in from companies that then just get immediately rewritten as stories. And I'll see if I can find a link to his specific article.
Yeah.
But he was talking about this kind of news article where once you tune into it, you can't unsee it. And his example was talking about an article in a newspaper that'll be something like, men's business suits are back into fashion in the office, and some survey about how more and more companies are deciding that the casual look is over and we're going to do more business suits now, and some graph about the sales of business suits and whatever.
Always based on a survey that someone's commissioned.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Some survey about this or that, and how like as soon as you think of that as a kind of article, you think, wait a minute. And he discusses how these kinds of things were coming into wherever he worked as a newspaper just an enormous amount of the time. And they just get kind of slightly modified and then sent into the newspaper as though they're reported stories, but they're basically something that the Association of Business Suit Manufacturers has just handed to the newspapers and hopes that they run.
That's easy.
Yeah. And also, even when you just talk about like the number, what should people know? I almost think that the newspapers and TV news are more. They're more a reflection of what do various interests want people to be told, as opposed to an accurate reflection of what should people know. And I think that the example of press releases is just a relatively small example of that. But it's not hard to like scale this up to governmental levels of like, what particular stories do particular interests want run. But is that something that you came across much in your work, like the press release issue? It sounds like you know it.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, when there were still fax machines, you just have piles and piles of press releases coming in all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, the press release thing is an age-old problem, and journalists do have again, the ego of the journalist has a natural revulsion to doing things that come from press releases. It's partly a pride, and it's partly a, well, I don't want to be spoon-fed attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a natural revulsion to it. But then there's a whole industry that has blossomed around getting around that problem. PR officers who are so skilled at writing press releases that they might be able to get around that, or they'll contact the journalist directly and say, I've got a story for you, and coat it in such a way that the journalist thinks they're doing something they're not doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a constant tension in news, press release versus news.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you're under pressure to find a story and you haven't got a good story that day, the press release is the get out of jail free card.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by like the systematic pressure. No one can blame a reporter for doing that if they have deadlines to meet that their job depends on. And there's a need, like that's why the press releases work is they're feeding into this system as well, and the newspaper wants a certain amount of material.
Yeah.
So the person is kind of caught in between those forces.
And it becomes a more economical way to fill a newspaper and to fill so you don't need as many staff because you're not having to send them all out to go and meet Deep Throat in a car park if they're just sitting at their desk rehashing a press release.
Yeah, real reporting takes a long time.
That is a constant tension. I will say this at the end, and I'll say this now. I don't know if you've read Flat Earth News by Nick Davis.
Yes, I have.
This everything we've talked about so far, and we'll talk about. If people find this even a little bit interesting, that is a book they should read, which is excellent about this. And he talks about churnalism, this churning out, this need to churn out stuff, and the pressures that creates on the journalist, and the press release exploits this journalistic culture. So I mean, what you're saying rings very true, and and it gets manipulated, and you can spot these press release stories if you know what you're looking for.
Yes.
That's just part of the.
I guess
the problem.
Yeah, and one of the things that when I hear people defending the news as an industry, again, it talks about informing people, but I don't know how to or let me put it this way. Just like once you know about the existence of press releases, you can see this kind of thing more easily in newspapers that you might read, or TV shows or TV news that you watch. I think there's a similar kind of thing, which again, I assume that this comes from the time pressure. I don't think it's necessarily laziness on the part of the reporters, and I notice this particularly when I go back to America and I watch American TV news, which has got to be just some of the most appalling news in the whole world. Everything is presented as what is happening right now. So the news is discussing like an event that is occurring at this moment. And I always think I'll be watching these like news clips, and I'll think, okay, I understand this is what's happening in politics at the moment, or this is a particular problem elsewhere. But nobody can understand this problem in a meaningful way unless we understand how did we get here. Like there's something happened before this problem that was the setup to this problem. And I'm always really aware on particularly American TV news, there's just no history. There's never any context.
I mean, but you've got to have this is where you have a problem of assumed knowledge, like how much background can you possibly put in? I mean, for someone who's just coming into the story for the first time, you could probably talk to them for half an hour about everything that's come before this point. But for someone who watches the news every night, this is just the next chapter of the story. You don't read the previous 19 chapters of a book every time you go to bed. You read the chapter you're up to now.
Yeah, no, and I understand what you're saying there. And I can go with that, but I would say that the majority of stuff that I see is presented in a totally context-less void.
Right.
Of we're going to talk about this problem, this event that is happening, but there is no future and there is no past, and we're just talking about the thing that is happening right now, and I think that kind of thing leads to a falsely informed citizenry. Like oh, you're aware of stuff that is sort of going on right now, but you don't have any kind of framework to understand it in a meaningful way. This goes back to my systems way of thinking. Is like so many of the things that are being discussed in the news, they are attention grabbing, or like they make you really angry, but they're just the bottom layer of something where the next layer up is the thing that really matters. And so like we'll someday we'll do an episode where we talk about politics in particular, but I think this is a great example, or sorry, voting I should say in particular, but as an example in America, that like you will hear all of these events and these stories about, say, corruption with particular politicians, or huge divide in the Congress over a particular bill, or whatever it is. And a lot of those things seem to come down the way the news presents them as stories about particular people. But there are systemic answers as to why, say, is Congress more divided now than it has ever been before. There is a totally reasonable answer, one level up, to that question. There are structural changes that have happened to the voting system that have made that different. But that level never gets talked about. It's always just like, let's look at this guy who's yelling about this one thing and this other guy who's yelling about some other thing. And there's no history about how did those guys get there, or why does the system now encourage much more partisanship than it ever did before. So I just think that if the news is informing you of these particular events, but it's almost like it's like junk food. It feels like, oh, I'm being informed. I know what's going on right now, but it's not. It's not a harder level of communication, but a more valuable level of communication.
But you can't. It's very hard to give people the amount of information you want to give them. I mean, you make 5-minute videos, right, that have lots of information in them, but let's see a few things about your 5-minute videos. They take a long time to make. They're researched for weeks. They have a lot of information in them, spoken very quickly, that you could never put on the news, because people can't absorb that while they're eating a TV dinner off their lap at the same time. That much density of information. You have this desire to give people all this information that you can't give them in the finite amount of space in which they're willing to absorb the information. And then you're left with the choice. Do people want to watch Billy punch Fred in the face, which is interesting to look at, or do they want 20 minutes about all the history of Billy and Freddie, since they were born, and all the problems they've had? And of course, if I said to you, I've got 2 videos here. One's 8 seconds of someone punching someone in the face, and one is a 20-minute spoken word piece about why 2 people don't get along with no punch. I think even you would watch the punch in the face.
Well, yeah. I think your longer video should have a punch at the end. But I guess the conflict for me here comes from. I totally agree with you. I would not disagree with anything.
Yeah, I'm saying pretty obvious stuff.
Yeah, but it's valuable to bring up, and so I guess the tension for me is what I get irritated by is the kind of exalted position that news has for itself in society,
right,
and what we think of it versus what is it actually doing.
This whole fourth estate holding politicians to account stuff I was spouting earlier.
I didn't want to say it then, because I was like, well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
But I it's like, I wouldn't mind the news so much if we could be more straightforward about what it is. It's much more like event entertainment or informational entertainment. But this whole the news holds the government to the account, and we inform the citizens. I just don't think that's what it's actually doing. That's what it claims it does, but that is not really the case of not even that they don't want to. I'm the first to acknowledge that there wouldn't necessarily be a market for that. So I acknowledge that. I understand the market demand for that. Again, that's another kind of system. Right? The newspapers are in trouble as it is, and so they need to be able to raise money, and to do that you need to have the attention of people, and so you're going to write shorter stories and not go into context. I'm fine with all of that. I understand.
And you're a product of it too.
Yeah.
You're a guy who loves talking for 2 or 3 hours about voting, but when you make your YouTube videos, they're 5 minutes long and have interesting visuals, and lots of stuff gets left out because you think people won't watch a long video.
But I am not claiming to be holding society to account.
Yeah.
That is the thing that just really, really gets me. It's like,
do you think they're pompous and self-important?
I both think that they're pompous and self-important, and I also think that normal people give the news too much credit.
Right.
That the normal people, normal people is a terrible word to use, but if you're just not paying attention, it's easy to over-assume, what the news is doing, and always everybody talks back to the Nixon tapes and Woodward and Bernstein, and this example always comes up, and it's like, hey guys, that was 40 years ago now. Can we? I love that was an awesome.
The Snowden stuff wasn't 40 years ago. That's quite recent.
Yeah. So the Snowden stuff is great, but in the modern world, I think it's really interesting that someone like Snowden exists, and he has so many more options about how to actually disseminate that information, and so we do live in a different kind of world where informants can get out their information more easily. And he went to several newspapers, if I remember. I don't know. Do you remember? Because I wasn't following that super closely, but I think he went to 3 or 4 newspapers he released it with. Do you remember the details of that?
I can't remember all the papers.
But I mean, he went to multiple newspapers.
Yeah. Well, you have to do that, don't you? Because of the US different markets. But yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's a. I don't want to speculate too much on his internal motivations, but my guess is that he may have done something like that because he wanted to make sure that other other people may have taken it seriously, and so you want to be in a newspaper because people assume that newspapers are where the serious stuff happens.
He took advantage of this situation, which you think is false, but yeah.
Yes, but I would think that if that was his goal, that was a good goal, right? It's going to come off as more respectable if he's going through, I don't even remember what they were, but let's just say like the New York Times, than if he has snowden.com/blog/secrets. It's just not going to have the same kind of impact. But I think that's a kind of, it's like a shared delusion almost. It's like everyone believes it, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. And one of the things that I'm interested in is just in the past couple of weeks, there have been a few reporters who have launched their own smaller scale independent news organizations.
Yeah.
And the one that I'm most interested in, that I haven't had too much time to look at, but I'm going to be curious to see where it goes, is, do you know Nate Silver of 538?
I know vaguely.
He was a former baseball statistician, I believe, who then moved into politics and basically applied statistical science to political elections. And surprise, surprise, the introduction of science into a field makes it much more accurate. And I think that the super interesting thing about him is that I followed a lot of his reporting in the previous presidential elections, and this is always where, like, I get my news because I try to find individuals that I think are very trustworthy, and I think he's one of those kinds of people. And his news reporting on the elections was just so different than anything you would find in the major newspapers. And it's like, this is a guy who is concerned about accuracy, about actually getting it right. And it was interesting to see how someone could still report on the elections, but from a very different perspective, and still be accurate, and still be interesting. And so what I'm curious is like, now that the internet is just so established, you have people like Nate Silver who have worked within the news industry, but who are also young enough and not entrenched enough to possibly want to spin off their own news organizations to some extent. That actually, to me, holds a lot of promise for the future of news. I can really imagine a future where there are smaller scale operations that are run by people who are maybe less directly attached to the current system as it exists, and can produce much more interesting and still accurate stories, and not have to have we're going to publish 50 articles every day. Okay, people, let's go. We're going to have a much smaller volume, but we're going to produce higher quality content. So I'm kind of hopeful about that stuff, and I'll be curious to see in a couple of years where that is.
What about all the people in the world who are not so much like you, with very specific interests and a desire for great detail, but want to know lots of things? What about the person who wants to know there was a plane crash in Malaysia, Manchester United sacked their manager, David Cameron did this celebrity has just brought out this movie, this has happened? Someone who wants to know lots of little things. They can't, not everyone can read a 19-page Nate Silver analysis of, I think, there are a lot of people who aren't like you, that just want an overview. They want someone to curate things for them, to summarize for them in a briefer way. And I mean, that's the definition of a newspaper almost.
Well, that to me is almost a different kind of thing. I have no problem with this kind of stock ticker news almost. You just want to, a little one sentence about what thing has gone on in the world. I can totally understand that. It's like the mid-length news that I often have problems with, stuff that just is both inaccurate and misrepresentative. I don't know, I guess this is just a particular frustration of mine because of how many times people send me stuff where I think, ooh, maybe there could be a really interesting video in this newspaper article. And so I go off and I research it, and it's like, oh, it turns out that this is just wildly inaccurate or misrepresentative. That's the kind of stuff that I don't like, and I just see it so often that it makes me kind of disregard all of the news. But again, I have no problem with people just wanting to be aware of sort of what's going on in the news, but I don't think that those little overviews are not enough for newspapers to survive on, right? They need to have more stuff for people to actually read and to go to.
Maybe that's why they're dying.
Yeah, and I mean, the great thing about the internet is if you are super into something, there's going to be a place that has all the in-depth news you could ever want about your super narrow topic, whatever it is. Like those kinds of sites exist, and more general stuff, it's harder for them to exist. But
your blog post, which I'm sure you'll put in the show notes, was excellent, by the way. It's one of my favourite blogs you've written, so make sure you put that in the show notes, where you kind of dissected a TV news report.
This is actually one of the rare things that I wrote. I wrote this basically in an afternoon because I got incredibly furious about it. But this is a good example as well of some of the things that frustrate me with the news. Is this example happened to be about a particular thing that was happening at the last debt ceiling in the United States. And there was talk on the news for a while about, is the mint going to make this $1 trillion coin? And this was all over the news. And this article, I want to be a kind of thing that just like the being aware of press releases, I would like people to be aware of a particular kind of thing you often see on the news, which is these video segments. I'm sure nothing like the video segments you ever produced, Brady, but these video segments that are done, it seems almost like by third parties, that the anchor like turns it over to, and here's some guy you've never seen before talking about a thing, or just like little video segments that if you pay attention to them, you will realize are entirely content free, that you basically learn nothing more than the title told you. And so in this particular example, I can't remember what news channel it was on or whatever, but they made some little 3-minute explanation about, is the United States going to make this $1 trillion coin?
3 minutes is a lot for a TV news report.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, super in depth. I go through this like scene by scene about what they talk about and just show how it's almost like it's trying to trick you into thinking that they're saying something, but they're saying nothing. And once you tune into that on a lot of news segments that you see, if you listen and think, wait, what do I know now that I didn't know 2 minutes ago? The answer is basically nothing. Like they told you nothing at all. And in this one in particular, they make a couple of just weird little, not exactly errors, but this kind of thing I see a lot in the news of weird little side steps that I was only aware of because I happened to be trying to research this topic, because I thought it was going to be part of my debt video, but I realized there's nothing to this story, even though everybody's talking about it. There's nothing here to discuss, so I never put it in the debt video itself. But yeah, so once you're aware of that, like watch the news, people, and then think, what do I know now that I didn't know before I started? And often it's very, very little, or could be compressed down into just a sentence or two, 20 minutes worth of stuff that you watch. So this is why I am not a big consumer of the news.
But why is it so well consumed then, in your opinion? I know there's, you could talk about sort of a downward spiral, but in general terms, still millions upon millions of people watch the news every night and buy newspapers every day. Mm-hmm. If it's as bad, if it's really bad, why are people paying money for it or devoting their time to it?
Well, first of all, there's a presumption that people are aware of the things that's wrong. And it's impossible to be aware of the things that are wrong unless you know the things. And so, like when I read stuff, you sort of have a presumption that the things are correct unless you happen to know otherwise. And so I don't think it's obvious to people that a lot of the news is kind of worthless or pointless or wrong, because there's no reason that they would know that. So you can't expect people would necessarily judge it that way. It's just like if I read some news story about a topic that I'm unfamiliar with, I have no ability to judge its correctness. And even I would just sort of, I guess it's sort of mostly right. I only happen to know if I research it more and then discover, this thing is wrong. As for why people consume the news, there are a few topics of conversation that I sometimes get into arguments at like dinners with friends or acquaintances and things, and one of them is this thing about how I don't really follow the news, and it seems like it's a societal expectation that if you're an informed citizen, and part of that is keeping up on the news.
So it's like irresponsible of you to not know what's going on in the world.
Yeah, that's usually the response that I get from a lot of people. Sometimes like great anger that I don't follow the news, or we joke, when I say, oh, I'm disappointed in you, Brady. I'm not really disappointed in you, but I've definitely met people who when they find out that I don't follow the news are like, oh, I have to think less of you now because this is a kind of societal benchmark.
It does amaze me. It does amaze me that you don't follow the news. I'm not like disappointed in you, but it does amaze me that someone who is interested in the things you're interested in is not more interested in news. I guess you're a history buff. That's what I think.
Man, that couldn't be a more wrong description of me.
I just think like, you look at you like to wait until the dust has settled, and that's what history is. History is waiting till the dust of news has settled, and we can just rationally go through what happened and how things work and why things happened the way they did. And the confusion of what's going on now seems to not appeal to you. You want to wait and see the result and then just dissect it and think, okay, that's what went down.
No, I couldn't disagree with you more.
Go on.
I guess I have no problem with the confusion of what's going on now, but that's a very different issue from following the news. I don't think that following the news is enlightening about confusion on particular issues.
No, I know you don't think that. That's why you want to wait till it all finishes.
No, it's not that I want to wait until it all finishes. Because that's implying I'm waiting for stuff to be settled. Like there are things that I follow that are confusing in the present that I don't have to wait until things are all settled. I mean, I guess I'll try to. Okay, this is a minor example, but of a story that I'm very interested in. I have been sort of following the stories of the protests against the Google and Yahoo buses out in San Francisco, and this is a relatively small and sort of local story, but it's caught my interest in a bunch of ways. I'm precisely interested in that because it's a very complicated story, and for those who are not familiar, the gist of it is it's a story of gentrification. People who lived in San Francisco before the technology companies came in, and the conflict between those two groups, the new techies and the residents who were previously there. And Google has buses that pick up their employees, and those are excellent targets for protests or complaining about, because it's a big object that says Google or Yahoo on the side of it. So I've been following this story, and this is not the dust is settled kind of issue. It's that doesn't bother me about that story. In fact, I'm very interested in that, and I don't know how to resolve the kinds of problems that are happening there. I guess my disinterest in following the news just has more to do with the information density is very low, and I feel like this is an experiment that you, dear listener, can kind of run on yourself, which is that if you follow the news a lot or you read newspapers, think in your mind how many of the things that you're reading now or that you're watching now will matter at all in, say, 3 months' time. At least when I do this, I think the result is, very few of the things that you're consuming or reading about matter at all in the long term. And I think that's a bias because of the way the news reports. Again, we acknowledge this, it's a structural requirement, just the stuff that's happening right now. I would say it's an interesting exercise for the listener to think, okay, well, if I spend, I don't know, a half hour watching the news or reading the newspaper, like, what is this activity of mine contributing towards? Like, why am I doing this? Now, if you like reading the news, again, I have no objection to this, just like before. I'm a very live and let live kind of guy.
It's recreation, like playing a video game.
Yeah, like if it's recreation, there's no argument there. If you enjoy something, there's no argument against that. It's totally reasonable. But if you are doing it, as I've had conversations with people, out of some sort of feeling that you need to be informed, I would suspect that if you really start thinking about it and you start paying attention to what are you actually reading and watching and how much of this stuff is going to matter, at some arbitrary point in the future, it's very low. And so I don't think that it is actually necessarily informing you about what's going on.
I think it is. It is informing you of what's going on. It's just what's going on won't matter. What was going on then won't matter in 3 months.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sorry, that is a much better way to phrase it. Yeah, I said the exact opposite of what I meant, which is what happens when you talk extemporaneously. Yeah, it's informing you of what's happening right now. But do you need to know that, or more importantly, is that how you want to spend your time? You know, I think that if people are following news out of a feeling of obligation, that is a bad way to spend that time. That if you want to know about stuff, you're better off possibly doing other things than following the news. So
I don't think they may say it to sound self-important, but I don't think many people who read the paper every morning or watch the TV news every night are doing it like it's a chore, like clearing out the gutters or mowing the lawn. I think they're doing it because they like it. I don't think people do it like I'd much rather be doing something else, but gosh darn it, I've got to read the paper. So like they may say they do it for reason A, but I think they're doing it for a different reason. I think you're right that people put a lot of importance and credibility on the news, and if they saw how the sausages were made, they would be mortified. I agree with that. And if they knew how often stuff is wrong, they would be mortified. And if they, if the way news is made could be quite shocking for them. But I don't think people consuming news with the motives you think they are consuming news with. I think they're doing it because they're entertained by it, and also because there's nothing humans like more than gossip and knowing what other humans are doing. Like whether it's what the next door neighbours have done or something that happened on the other side of the world, people just love gossip, and I mean gossip in every sense of the word, in the pointless so and so kissed so and so sense, but also in the 100 people died in a landslide sense. And people like that. That's why newspapers get to exist. People don't like the ads, and people don't read papers because someone tells them they have to. People like consuming some of that stuff, and it's exploited. It's exploited by commercial interests in the form of press releases, and it's exploited by governments in the form of propaganda, and that corrupts the product. But everything's corrupted by something, and that doesn't mean it's acceptable, but that's just the way it is. But I don't think people I don't think people have as lofty a view of the news as maybe you think they do. But it doesn't mean it's not important and people don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is just a bias when if I get into these arguments with people that these are their go-to arguments. The news is important, and I am reading about important things, and people don't want to say, yeah, I just kind of like it.
There is medicine in the dog food though. There is some medicine put in the dog food from time to time, and I think, yes, I could mention Watergate, and yes, you could mention the Snowden stuff, but even in the little day-to-day ways, whether it's the local council being held to account because the local paper ran a story about their sneaky attempt to ban dogs off the leash in the local park opposite the road, which is a purely hypothetical scenario.
Not something I saw you. Yeah, not something I saw you complaining about on Twitter.
No, but like even on that micro level, like amongst all that rubbish that's in my local newspaper here in my little town, there is 1 or 2 stories a week that the local councillors don't like, or some businessman who's trying to get something built and the local people are protesting about don't like. Like there is that public accountability, and there are new things coming on stream that are taking that role. You can name and shame people on Twitter now, and maybe slowly the old creaking institutions of 24-hour news channels and newspapers are being replaced by new technology. But that new technology is still doing that fourth estate job, and I think you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And if we didn't have that public voice, whether it's cool Twitter and Facebook or whether it's old-fashioned newspapers, we would have problems. I think there is these corrupt institutions that you dislike so much play an important role. Just like courts can be corrupted, but if we did away with courts tomorrow, I think society would be hurt.
Yeah, I'll back you on that one. I'm not sure how we jump to the courts, but yes, I will totally back you on that one. Again, the notion of something holding society to account is something that I'm very much in favor of. Like I'm A-okay with that, and I'm very interested to see where some of these newer, younger news projects go. But
you don't think the big boys do it at all? You think they're completely devoid of any aspect of that, and there's not, and that those in positions of power aren't in any way moderated by the spotlight of publicity?
So at all is a very strong statement, and I had a link here that I added to the show notes because I thought it was an interesting example, but it was I'll have to look up. I think it was the Washington Post in the States, but they did, as an example of positive news that I thought was good, they did a very interesting article about bureaucratic waste in the United States. And it was kind of an unbelievable article because it goes into details about how it sounds like it's out of the movie Brazil, but there is an underground facility in West Virginia that's an old abandoned coal mine that has been turned into a football-length paper processing facility that has to do with processing all the paperwork for United States federal workers' retirement. And when you read about this, you think, how can this exist? This is appalling that this is the system that is in use, and it has been this way for the past 40 years. And I put that in the notes because I thought, that's an interesting example that I came across recently of something in a major newspaper that, again, I'm presuming that it's right, sheds light in an interesting way on a particular kind of problem. Governments are always going to be slow to change. That's part of their nature. That's fine. I don't expect them to be as quick changing as companies, and I think we wouldn't necessarily want them to be as quick changing as companies. But maybe a unbelievable mine under the ground processing paperwork for 40 years is like, maybe we should update that. And
it sounds kind of awesome, though.
It does. I have to say, I thought, man, if I'm ever in West Virginia again, I want to see that.
Yeah.
That sounds great. That sounds super cool. But at the same time, it's absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
So never is a strong word, but if we're gonna do a throwback to the follow-up, talking about the pluses and the minuses, I think that there are winners there. There are good things that are done in major newspapers, but they are just relatively small compared to the enormous stream of irrelevancy that is produced. There are many systems that act like this in life, where there's an enormous amount of stuff that maybe isn't worth very much, and there's a couple of diamonds in the rough. And in a pre-internet world, I would say that newspapers are much more defensible, because you need some kind of publishing medium. You need to be able to speak to the broader world.
Yeah.
But in a post-internet world, I'm sufficiently confident that those diamonds can be found without the existence of the newspapers.
Well, and what you're saying has been completely borne out by commercial reality too. I mean, obviously, newspapers are now struggling.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that role of these sort of overarching curators is no longer necessary.
Yeah, and I can't say I'm ever going to shed a tear for the newspapers, especially when they freeboot our videos as often as they do in the online sections, which they're the worst about.
Yeah.
That's always not super respectable. And I don't see that as much with smaller sites, but anyway, that's a side point.
There is this minor danger or problem, and I haven't thought this through much, but there is this slight concern that if we no longer have a commercially sustainable way for people to put resources into proper investigation and exposure, will we be poorer for that? For example, if you've got some crummy newspaper that's writing all this irrelevant stuff, and I and the first to admit that happens, they usually have like one man or woman on staff who's just, sits in the corner and is allowed to beaver away on some story that, and like that kind of luxury doesn't exist as much in this kind of mean, lean internet world where
I think you're wrong about that. You're wrong about that. I'm gonna give an example that is gonna sound like the craziest example to people who are on the internet. But do you know BuzzFeed?
Yes.
Okay. So for people unfamiliar, BuzzFeed produces. If you go to their website, it looks like, at a glance, it looks like some sort of terrible clickbaity website. That has like top 10 celebrity plastic surgery disasters. This
Which
kind
Muppet are you?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that BuzzFeed has. But they must be running some kind of internal team that does this exact same function, because every once in a while they come out with some amazing piece of original reporting. One of the examples that just happened recently, which is why it's on the top of my mind, was a total investigation into how has the United States, let's say, how has the executive branch of the government gained so many powers in the war on terror to do all kinds of things that weren't in the original bill that gave them these powers. And they recently ended up doing just a show with Radiolab that goes into this, and I'll try to find the article and I'll put the Radiolab show in the show notes. But this is clearly something that took a lot of time and a lot of depth to investigate. And I've seen a couple of these other things from BuzzFeed as well that, I might be totally wrong here, I'm speculating about their internal structure, but it seems like, oh, okay, you guys are doing a similar kind of thing. Your What Muppet Are You articles, you're using that to fund probably much longer, much more in-depth pieces elsewhere.
You're completely agreeing with my argument that to sustain responsible, labour-intensive journalism, you need some kind of commercially successful, or as you would describe, a relevant vehicle around it.
Why, yes, I am.
And newspapers have done it, and now if we want it to exist on the internet, we need clickbaity BuzzFeed. I agree with you. Like this is clearly the successful model for possibly doing some of this stuff, and I'm interested to see something like BuzzFeed do that. But I'm much more interested to see, like I said, someone like 538 try to do an in-depth, respectable thing every day, all day. Like that's the experiment that I'm very curious to see. But I guess my thought here is just like, BuzzFeed does not have an aura of respectability around it. No.
And I just think that BuzzFeed is what it is, and they want, again, I'm just speculating about their internal structure, but they're a commercial entity. They want to exist, and I like BuzzFeed almost more because then they're more honest about what it is. It's like, hey, look, we have a whole bunch of like clickbaity stuff, and also we every once in a while produce an amazing piece of
but that's just because they're new, and they're using that reputable stuff to improve their reputation and brand, to become seen more respectable and a bit more appealing. I mean that's just, I'm sure when newspapers started they were probably these young upstarts, and it took them years and years to build this deserved or undeserved reputation as these institutions and papers of record.
I would disagree, just because of the presumed amount of resources you had to have when you were starting a newspaper versus starting a website.
Yeah.
Pre-existing newspapers had to come with a lot of blessings and resources to pop into existence in the first place. But I know nothing about the history of newspapers. I have no idea. Maybe people were complaining about, oh, I can't deal with all of these, which saint are you articles and this new this newfangled piece of paper that shows up at my door. Boy, is this dumb. And then eventually, they're exposing articles about the the feudal lord down the street. Like, boy, that's really great. I don't know anything about
look at that corset.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah. Yeah, those ankle length skirts are going to ruin society.
Yeah.
Who knows about that? But I guess it's also just like I have no complaints about people who just read stuff because they like it. I have no issue with that. I guess I feel like it's just a question of for a lot, like how do you want to spend your time? If you like reading and watching the news, I think that's fine, as long as you sort of face it for what it is. And I would argue that maybe, again, I just don't like the aura of respectability that is attached to a lot of the old school news stuff, and I think that the internet can replace a lot of that, maybe in a more honest and maybe in a better way. And I'm very curious to see how the whole news experiment goes in, say, the next 5 years or so with that. And again, with newspapers being both in trouble and a bunch of upstarts in the news business. I'll be very curious, but I guess my final parting word of advice is like I think for people who want to try to like find out what's going on in the world, you can't necessarily do all the investigations yourself. I think probably an optimal strategy right now is to try to find individuals that you trust. Follow those people and see, what are they talking about, because they may be less influenced by pre-existing structures. That's kind of my thought about, like, if you still want to know what's going on in the world, maybe follow individual people. So yeah.
And read Flat Earth News by Nick Davies, because as someone who worked as a journalist for 14 years on the inside, that's me, I read that book and I was like, that is exactly right. And I would turn to people and say, if you want to know about the problems of being a journalist and why journalism is the way it is, he's brutally honest about a few of them. The journalism and the electric fence and some of the other things he talks about. Really,
yeah.
Very true.
I feel like I don't know how you could have read that book and still have any kind of positive view about the news. Because that book is so depressing. I think especially if you're coming to it unprepared, boy, that book is not a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. That book is just piles of poo on top of more piles of poo. That's what it is. But it's interesting reading.
I read the book just after I'd left the BBC, and obviously a lot of my family and friends are still journalists, and I often say, isn't this book great? And I cite things from it, and they do get a bit upset at me. So maybe, I guess I've been the advocate of journalism to a certain extent in this podcast, just because someone's got to argue with you. But certainly that book, that paints a bleak and pretty honest picture of a lot of the problems that face journalism at the moment. I'm realising what this podcast is. It's
what?
Brady's Paper Cuts, where I have a quick little moan about something small, and then you do these big gaping wounds of society where you just bring down all the institutions like the education system and the media.
Okay, I don't know what we'll talk about next time. We'll have to pick a lighter topic for episode 2 of season 2 of Hello Internet. I don't know.
Next week will be Brady complains about stubbing his toe, and then Gray talks about why democracy is a huge failure.
No, we'll have to talk about which Muppet are you. You are sick, and I am just exhausted, and the amount of coffee that I need is more.
Let me ask you this. I just want to clear something up here, because you're like one of my American friends. Element 13 on the periodic table, symbol Al.
I was going to say, you don't need to tell me the symbol. Element 13 is aluminum.
Aluminum?
Mm-hmm.
You mean aluminium?
Are you really going to start this argument? Do you know what
the funny thing is?
I need to pull up some Google stuff right now. Go ahead.
No, you don't need to.
No, I do. I certainly do. But keep talking. I'm gonna do a little live research right now. Yeah, go ahead.
I am across this issue. I actually thought you were going to be in the aluminium camp on this.
Why on earth would you think that?
I don't know. I just thought. That's just what I thought. I know a lot of Americans say aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to. I don't know. It's just what I thought would happen. But no, you called it aluminum. Tell me your live research or your position or whatever.
I'm trying to find out, because I thought that there was some chemistry organization that that's in charge of the pronunciation things.
IUPAC, the International Union of Applied and Pure Chemistry. You're talking to the guy that makes periodic videos, man. If IUPAC sneeze, I make a video.
All right, then because I'm trying to pull it up here because I couldn't remember which way they went on this.
Yeah, it was 1990 that they basically said it's aluminium, right? That was the deal. And they also, I think, changed the spelling on cesium and sulfur. And there was this kind of, I think there was a bit of a deal where they gave one to the Americans and the Americans gave some to the Europeans. And the Europeans did the right thing and took on the American side of the deal. And the Americans just said, no, we're sticking with aluminum, we don't care. And about 2 or 3 years later, IUPAC folded like a deck of cards and said, okay, you can have both. Aluminium is still the first preference. It's still how they write it on their official periodic table. But they have a little footnote saying, some people also say aluminum, meaning Americans who renege on deals.
Yeah, that's the passive aggressive some people. Wikipedia is sometimes very good at the super passive aggressive way of phrasing something. They're like, oh, we're neutral. We're just passively aggressively neutral. I'm looking at this. I thought there was something more recent than that, but I'm gonna take your word for it.
Well, it's Aluminium Week on periodic videos, and I'm doing millions of videos about them. So don't go throwing a spatter in my works now.
Well, if it I don't know if this makes you feel better or if it makes you feel worse, but when I taught here in the UK, I would always say aluminium. I would never say aluminum because it was just far too distracting for the students to hear apparently what is the hilarious American pronunciation. So I would say aluminium and never a comment. So I adopted that while I was here teaching, but if I'm just saying it in normal speech, it's going to be aluminum.
You did have a little minor victory though in my house today.
Oh yeah?
Because my sister has started listening to all the Hello Internets and she's really into it, which was surprising but nice because I'm sure she doesn't watch my videos or anything, but anyway, she started listening. She says she enjoys it. So we're having a chat and then I said, oh, I've got something else I want to show you. We were talking on Skype and I went and got this periodic table that has just been sent to me by my high school chemistry teacher from Australia, and it was the periodic table that was up on the wall of my classroom when I was a student that like inspired my interest in chemistry. And it's this huge old, outdated, dusty old thing, but it's a great piece of memorabilia. And I pulled it out and said, look at this, look what's been sent to me, really proudly. And she just went, more rubbish for your morsel in there.
That's great.
I know she was, which is ridiculous because her house is full of stuff. But anyway, she was on your side there. So
I like that she called it your mausoleum. That is great. That is really good. Could we ballpark your age based on how many elements are on that periodic table? I don't know the rate at which elements have been discovered over the past several decades, but where does that periodic table stop? You must have it framed somewhere by now.
No, it's next to my desk though, rolled up. Hang on, let me see if I can unroll it for you.
Yeah.
All right, I've got it. Here we go. It's massive. This is actually really hard to do.
We need a picture of this for the show notes in the future.
Yeah, I actually made a video about it because when I went to Australia, it was still up in the classroom, and I went there with the professor from Periodic Videos, and we said, "Look, there's the periodic table that inspired the website and the videos," and it was all very lovely. And now, all this time later, he's actually sent it to me. I was hoping they'd keep it up there and maybe put like one of those little blue plaques underneath it and say this is where Brady Haran went to school and stuff. But no, they've basically gotten rid of it, dumped it on me.
That's exactly it. They knew who would accept it gratefully.
Well, element 104 is not even named here, so.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
104 is, oh god, can I remember? Is it ruthenium, something like that? What is it?
I don't know. It ends in EM, but you'll probably end it with UM because you're American.
I don't know.
Anyway, there you go. More tap for my house. But
wait. So it has 104, but 104 is not named. Is that right?
It's still got that Latin naming convention. Yeah. So. It actually stops. It stops at 106. But 106 is the unknown hexium. It's got the UUH as well. So, if you want to know the year, I'll just look. There'll be a year written on it somewhere.
Ah, God, it's Rutherfordium. I cannot believe I couldn't remember that. That is disappointing.
Why are you disappointed? I wouldn't have thought you'd be really into the periodic table.
Okay, I will tell you yet another story of me just being a terrible person. Then I guess which goes along with this. I had a friend in college who I was somewhat competitive with, and she was a chemistry major and I was a physics major, and simply to irritate her, I memorized all of the names of all of the elements and their atomic number and their positions in the periodic table. I was trying to drive home, of course, like a physics major would, the point that, oh, chemistry is just stamp collecting. Like, I can spend a few days and memorize this thing, and it's, oh, I basically know all there is to know about your subject. But I have a whole flashcard system that I keep up to date. I like to put little facts and things in it. And that periodic table, the information is still in my flashcard system to this day. So I can usually, not as well as I did back in the day, but I can usually know the name of an element given the atomic number of the element.
Do you watch the TV show Pointless?
I do not.
I won't bore you with the details of the show, but the idea of the show is to know answers to questions to which there are multiple answers, like, you know, elements on the periodic table, but to pick the most obscure possible answer.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is not just to get it right, but to get it right in a way that no one else would get it right. They do a poll of 100 people, and that you've got to find the answer that no one else said, which is still correct.
I don't know, is this like reverse Family Feud? I don't entirely understand this premise.
Yeah. That's not a bad way to put it. Yeah, but it still has to be factually correct.
So, okay, you want the answer that is factually correct that the fewest number of people give.
Yeah, and if
Okay.
no one gave it, then that answer is considered pointless, and that's like you know, that's the huge.
Okay, so that's the big win. Nobody else said this. It is still correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I like
to
this premise. That's interesting.
Yeah. So to give you an example, that was just on the other day. I was watching it the other day, and I wasn't doing very well. But then, sort of the grand finale for the big jackpot, they had 5 areas they could choose between, and one of them was chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
One of the women on the show really fancied herself as a bit of a science expert, and had been talking herself up as this real science guru through the show.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, "We're going to do chemistry," but with supreme confidence. So I thought, oh well, this is going to be good. And then the question was, name an element on the periodic table for which its symbol is also the first 2 letters of the element's name, which is a, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sorry. So
Yeah.
it took a second for my brain to parse, but yeah,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Got it.
So like helium has
Right.
the symbol He, and that's also the first 2 letters of helium.
Right.
So
Xenon?
yeah. So I mean, there are quite a few of them. So the idea was to come up with one that, you know, no one else would think of.
Oh, that's why I was
So
trying to pick Xenon there. That's the fastest one I can come up with that probably the fewest number of people would guess.
I can't remember what ones I was fancying. But anyway, so I was reeling off a whole bunch that I thought were likely, and then she decided, and she was allowed to name 3, and one of them had to be completely pointless to win the jackpot.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be no one else had said it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, let's see what she names, and the ones she named were plutonium. So wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other one she named was boron, which is just B. But then
That's great. There's not even
Yeah.
2 letters.
No, it gets better. The piece de resistance, and her one that she thought was most likely to be correct, so she made it her like banker,
Mhm.
was unobtainium.
Oh God.
I know. And this was the one who said, I really want to do a science category because, you know, I know my science. And like leapt at the chance to do chemistry. She had 3 options.
Unobtainium. Oh God.
I was pretty disappointed.
I hate James Cameron so much for putting unobtainium in Avatar. It
was bad.
That was really bad. That was really bad.
I agree.
I don't know. I mean, I have to explain this just briefly to anyone on the internet who happens to be listening, and who made it all the way through Avatar. But unobtainium was a science fiction term, just to refer to some kind of material which is not possible to actually make. So it was a generic classification. So like the material in the Ringworld books that those worlds are made of, you could say, oh, that is an unobtainium because it's an incredibly light, super strong metal that can't possibly exist. And then for Cameron to actually have the metal that they're going after in the movie called unobtainium, it's just so distracting. There were so many things in that movie that I hated, but that one really ground my gears. It would be like having something in a movie that the characters are going after that is called the MacGuffin. Oh, we are trying to find the MacGuffin, right? It's like only the first movie that did the MacGuffin, that created the term MacGuffin, is allowed to do that. You, in your subsequent movies, can't just call something a MacGuffin without being incredibly distracting. That movie made me furious for very many reasons. Papyrus subtitles being one of them as well. But the unobtainium particularly was just like, I cannot believe that. Just make up a new name. That's the laziest, most awful, distracting thing you could possibly do.
That movie's dating badly too. When it came out, like I didn't hate it. And I saw it at the IMAX,
so
and
much.
I thought it's pretty impressive. You know, it's got its flaws, but it was pretty impressive to look at. And I watched it again the other day because I stumbled over it on the telly, and it's looking really poor these days. Like time has not been kind to it.
Good.
How many stars? How many stars are you giving it?
No stars. I give it no stars.
No stars.
No stars.
So, any more follow-up?
Well, can I just tell you one more thing about Avatar, actually? Can I just...
No.
No.
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay, good. You know what I hate most about that? The ending of that movie drives me crazy. And sometimes I just remember the ending of that movie and it makes me angry. Because I think, okay, this spacefaring civilization has, is coming into conflict with basically people with no technology whatsoever. And I can understand the notion that maybe under highly specific circumstances, right, the natives can win a ground war on this planet. Sure, whatever, I'll let that slide. But the final scene...
The Ewoks did it.
Yeah, right, like I'll give it to the Ewoks, fine. You know the terrain, those AT-ATs can be tripped up quite easily with some string, fine, I'll let that go. Right? But in Star Wars, like the whole empire, it crumbles, this whole system is gone. No, in Avatar, the locals are loading the invaders back onto their spaceships, right? Their spaceships, presumably. To take off and to go into space. And the whole opening premise of that movie is that they're coming from Earth because there's some unspecified huge problem on Earth. People are dying, so they need this unobtainium. It's incredibly expensive. It's hugely valuable. They're not just gonna go home, right? They're not just gonna go back to Earth and be like, well, sorry, everybody, right? We couldn't remove that tree from its particular location, and we know billions of people have to die, but they did fight us off with sticks on the ground. It's just, oh, God. I cannot stand that. Spaceship. Sorry. It makes me angry. I hate that movie so much.
Weren't they mainly AT-STs that the Ewoks were taking out, more than the AT-ATs?
You know what the terrible thing is? As soon as I said it, I realized it was the wrong designation because, the AT-ATs are the four-legged versions, and the AT-STs are the two-legged versions.
You don't muck around with that.
The only shot, I think, of AT-ATs in the final movie is there's a shot of them kind of patrolling the base. But
when Luke gets handed over to Darth Vader, you see one.
Yeah, there's like an AT-AT in the lower left-hand side of the screen. But as soon as I said it, I regretted it and I knew it was wrong. But I thought, I can't derail myself at this very moment. But I am glad you picked it up on.
I've saved us a good 20 minutes in follow-up next week.
You have. We would have gotten emails, and you know what? That's the kind of person who could pick up on that. I appreciate that if you realize it's the wrong designation. So.
Yeah, I accept on Facebook with my friends and stuff, if people make spelling mistakes or typos or get commas or apostrophes wrong, you let that stuff go. Mm-hmm. But when friends start spelling Star Wars things incorrectly, I was having a discussion the other day on Facebook with a friend about the Sarlacc.
Mm-hmm,
and he spelled Sarlacc incorrectly, and I wasn't letting that go.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was all about pedantry, because someone had posted a picture of R2-D2 with a lightsaber, someone dressed as R2-D2 but also wielding a lightsaber, and someone's like, R2-D2 never had a lightsaber, and then someone's like, well, as a matter of fact, yes, he did when he fired the lightsaber to Luke Skywalker.
I was going to say, he was at the very least contained it, yes.
Yeah, but then I was like, well, okay, if you're going to call that, you've got to get Sarlacc spelled correctly, and then, anyway, it spiraled into the sort of conversation that results in you never having a girlfriend.
That's true. I mean, I imagine we could talk about Star Wars for forever, which we're not going to do. But I will just say, as a fun little, what I've been up to thing, it was recently May the 4th, which has become this kind of weird Star Wars sort of holiday, I guess. And I spent my May the 4th. I didn't do this on purpose, but afterwards I thought, this worked out quite well for reasons we'll get into later, I had stuff that I need to do, and I spent the whole May 4th rewatching one of my favorite things on the internet ever, which is the Red Letter Media reviews of Star Wars Episodes 1, 2, and 3. Have you seen these, Brady?
There is no better way to spend your time than watching those. They are brilliant.
I have thought many a time that I forgive the existence of those first 3 movies because without them we would not have the Red Letter Media reviews. I will put the link in the show notes. If you haven't seen these things, they are great. And what I will just pre-warn people that the style of them takes a lot of getting used to. There's a kind of super creepy narrator who is doing this review of why the first 3 movies are awful. Trust me, people, run with it. Just go along with it. It is completely worth it. They are amazing. They're really entertaining, and I often think of them as, I mean, they are as long as the movies themselves. I think it's 6 hours to watch all of them from start to finish. They're great. And
he does great. He's done some really good stuff on some other films too. I mean, the Star Wars is the pinnacle, but the Indiana Jones stuff's quite good.
Yeah, and the Star Trek ones. I actually, my wife has seen the Red Letter Media reviews, but my wife is a very big Star Trek fan. I think I've sort of referenced this before on the show, and I will not let her watch the Red Letter Media Star Trek reviews because I've told her, and I know her well enough to know that this is true. These reviews will just ruin some of the things on Star Trek for you forever. You can't unsee some of the things that he talks about or the flaws that he points out. So there's a whole team of guys at Red Letter Media, and I mean those reviews are, I think, just great reviews. But I would definitely list the Star Wars reviews in particular as one of my 10 favorite things I have ever seen on the internet. So it'll be in the show notes. Check it out, people. It's amazing.
Follow up.
We were talking about news last time. Someone in the Reddit left a quote, which again I thought summarized my position just beautifully, which is this Mark Twain quote that goes, "If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed, and if you read the newspaper, you're misinformed." And I thought that just struck me as beautiful. Like, that is a perfect encapsulation of basically my opinion of most of the news. And I choose to be uninformed rather than misinformed. So I love that. So thanks to whoever posted that on the Reddit. That was just perfect. That was really good.
Did Mark Twain say anything in his life that wasn't like an awesome quote? Like, he must have been 500 years old to have said all the awesome quotes that he said.
Well, this is it. I have not investigated if this is actually Mark Twain. There's so many misattributed to Mark Twain kind of quotes. It's like Yogi Berra. There's a certain kind of quote that just gets ascribed to a particular person. So someone can tell us in the comments if that is a sourced Mark Twain quote, or if this is just a manufactured Mark Twain quote, or if somebody else said it who wasn't as famous as Mark Twain. But either way, that statement I think is just perfect, absolutely perfect.
Got a link here that you put a link down that you wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, just very briefly, because I mentioned Nate Silver's 538 project. The other one that I wanted to mention, which is I don't know this reporter as well, but this guy called Ezra Klein has started his own news project as well, which looks promising. I was taking a look at it a little bit earlier today. But one of the things I like that they're doing on this alternate news project as well is they're publishing, if they interview someone, they're publishing both the interviews, like the full length, here's the actual interview we did, in addition to the story itself. And I think that is a great example of how news on the internet can just be so different. You know, you can have a story that summarizes an interview that you did with somebody, and within that story, you can link to the audio version or whatever of
because
the full
space
hour.
is no limitation.
Yeah,
there's no
limit at all. And I think part of it is a guy I have followed for years called Paul Graham was recently caught out in a big problem where some quotes that he said were sort of taken out of context, and this is the kind of thing where I think it is great if this could become more of a standard. That look, if you're going to do a story, you're going to publish the whole interview as well, so you can't try to spin it in a particular way. And also on the flip side, it doesn't allow people to just claim that they were misquoted if they are actually just said some horrible thing, or if they really meant it. They can't say, oh, the newspaper took me out of context. because again, you have the whole interview there. So I just thought that was a good example of how the internet is different and can be better than traditional news reporting in some ways. So.
And a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put a link to Vox in the show notes if people want to check that out.
Today's episode of Hello Internet has been sponsored by our friends at Audible.com, the leading provider of spoken audio information and entertainment. Listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Now you can get a free audiobook when you sign on for the Audible membership. If you go to audible.com/hellointernet, you'll find all the details. And I always really enjoy Audible ads because we get to recommend a book. And today Gray's let me loose. He's going to let me recommend one. But first of all, I think I'd quickly talk about why you would listen to audiobooks. I've only really gotten into audiobooks in the last couple of years, and that's because of a few changes in my life. One is I've started driving a lot more and longer distances because of my work. And like reading an actual book at the wheel of the car is pretty dangerous. So I give that a miss and go for the audiobooks instead. But also you've probably heard me talk recently on the podcast about some trips I've taken to the Himalayas, and that involves basically, 10-hour walks each day, and audiobooks really help pass the time. Now when I did those trips, I filled up the iPhone with books all about Mount Everest and the Himalayas, and I love mountaineering books full stop. I want to recommend a book today called High Crimes by Mokul Kodas, I guess is how you'd pronounce his name. This is a book I listened to while walking to Everest Base Camp. And basically, the subheading of the book is The Fate of Everest in an Age of Greed. And it really is about, the crazy things people are getting up to on the mountain these days. This isn't like sort of into thin air where you think, some people here have got moral dilemmas. This book tells some stories about some acts people do that are, just plain criminal. It really is extraordinary. It's a true story, and it's told really cleverly. It's told from the two different sides of the mountain at the same time. Some people who are going up from the Nepal side and some other people who are going up from the China, Tibet side. It's really worth listening to. It's well narrated, it's well written, and if you're someone who does like going for walks, it's a really nice book to have playing while sort of, admiring the scenery and watching the world go by. So there you go, High Crimes. If you want to listen to it, Audible has it, along with 150,000 other titles. Not all mountaineering books, unfortunately, but they've got pretty much every genre covered. You'll find what you're looking for, go to audible.com and put /hellointernet so they know you came from us. And remember, you get a free audiobook when you sign on for their 30-day trial today. Thanks for sponsoring us. That's audible.com /hellointernet. I just wanted to share a little moment I had with you. And it was a nothing moment, but I think it will speak to you in some way, being a robot, of course. Basically, I'd been filming all this stuff on all my various cameras, including the high-speed slow-motion camera that creates these enormous files that take days to process. Mm-hmm. And I've actually got a second computer in a corner that just processes those files for various reasons. Mm-hmm. So I had plugged in all the high-speed camera and all these files were processing, and then over on my main computer I had all my rushes from that day's filming all going into the computer, and at the same time the computer was processing some other videos from one format to another that needed doing, and at the same time I was downloading a bunch of stuff that was being sent to me by someone else via Dropbox. And while that was going on, I think I was just surfing the internet or something, and I suddenly looked around at what was going on and how much work these machines were doing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, computers are pretty amazing.
Good.
They're amazing, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They are quite amazing and super important.
I remember I was once going for a walk and I was closing a gate that had to be closed, otherwise sheep would escape. And someone had attached a rock to the chain that pulls the gate closed, and because that rock was tied on there, the gate would always be pulled closed, you couldn't leave it open by mistake. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that and I thought, isn't that clever? Isn't that amazing? How clever humans are. Mm-hmm. And I spent a good 5-10 minutes talking to people about this clever person who'd attached a rock to a chain. Mm-hmm. And yet all day I'm surrounded by these machines that are doing these remarkable things. and you just don't think about it.
I think that the rock on a chain and the computers are kind of the same thing. Of you want to set up an environment that assists you in whatever it is you want to do. So I actually really love the rock on the chain as well, because it's the same thing of there are going to be times when you're exiting the gate and you're occupied with something else, or you're in a big hurry, and so you want to engineer the situation so that it is not possible for you to forget, because then you have sheep running all over the countryside or whatever it is. You know, the raptor gets loose because you didn't put the bolt in the way it's supposed to be. Like, well, you shouldn't be able to leave the cage unbolted. So I think that stuff is great, and the computers are the same thing. You know, having the machines do work for you when you're not actively using it is brilliant.
The sheer volume of work they do is amazing, though. Like, just anyway. So I sound like I've just come from. I sound like a caveman, don't I? Like I've just come from, and like, but sometimes you just forget, like just how much they do and how quickly. But anyway, it was just a little moment I had, and a little nostalgic moment, and I thought, Gray would like this.
I
feeling the love for computers.
I do. I'm glad that you appreciate, you know, the mechanical servants that we have in our lives, the digital servants that we have in our lives.
So speaking of technology and digital servants and assistants, I went to phone you the other day and I didn't get through. I got your voicemail. It basically is just you saying, don't leave a message. I don't listen to messages.
Yeah, that's about right.
I liked that. It was it was hardcore, you know.
Yeah.
Don't mess around with pleasantries. Just like, you're wasting your time. It's like sending you an email. Don't bother.
No. See, emails at least have the possibility of catching my attention. But
you don't check your voicemail at all?
Yeah, in case I can't play, my voicemail basically says, "Hi, you've reached CGP Grey. Don't leave a voicemail, and do not check these messages." And the thing that baffles me is that I know people still leave voicemails. I don't understand who the people are who leave these voicemails, because I don't listen to them. I'm not kidding around. And a little while ago, when I think it was in the latest version of iOS, Apple introduced a feature where you can block messages or text from a particular phone number. So I actually blocked whatever number it is that my telephone service provider uses to send me a notification to let me know that I have 45 unread voicemail messages. So I was like, oh, this is great, so I can block this. So now I don't even have to once a week get some dumb text telling me that there's some messages that I should listen to. So no, my voicemail is basically just a black hole. Things go in there and they never come out. I never listen to any of those.
What if your wife gets abducted or something and she's trying to call you from the trunk of a car, or she's being sped out to the countryside? She's saying, "Help me, darling, help! They've got me, and last I saw."
First of all, she'd probably send me a text message. But second of all, I mean, I have my phone on me all the time. If she tries to call, I can see that it's her calling. Again, with on the iPhone, her picture shows up. It's my wife, so I know to take that call. But my phone blocks anything from unknown numbers. I just don't even receive those. But of course, the people in my life who want to be able to contact me know how to contact me, but they're not going to leave a voicemail message. I don't know who these people are, and I guess I never will know who the people are who leave voicemail messages. I guess all I know is that they have my phone number, but they don't know the ways that I actually want to be contacted, and that's fine, I guess. It's never caused any problems for me.
So, I came across a video the other day, which I have shown you today. I will try and explain the video for the few people out there who have not seen it, and it must only be a few because it's been watched 29 million times.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull it up again, even though it infuriated me. Yes, 29. Oh, actually, as of now, it's now 30 million views. They must have just updated it.
So, I will try to summarize it before I let you off the leash. It's a very clean-cut young man in a sensible sweater, reciting a poem that I believe he wrote, and it was kind of one of those poems that you write at school that is nice because it will rhyme all the time while you eat some lime, sort of thing. It was quite a rhymey poem, and it's all about sort of our current society's obsession with social media and always being on our computers and our phones. And sort of a video like this comes along every few months, I guess, that goes viral, which is ironic that they come along and go viral on social media. But anyway, this one went viral. There was one last year that was really good, actually. The one about that girl that was sort of hanging out with her friends and doing all these activities, and everyone was always on their phone.
Yes, I'll see if I can find that one, because I remember that one making the rounds, and I really like that one.
That one was good, but this one's a bit, I don't know, this one didn't do it for me so much. But anyway, do you know what? I'm going to be completely honest with you. I haven't even watched it all. I will not give 5 minutes to a video I don't enjoy, but I believe you did watch it all.
Well, to be clear about this, you sent this to me and said, "Oh, I really want you to watch this for today's program." Now,
because I wanted to stir you up.
Well, I was stirred up partly because about 3 minutes into it, I said something to you like, I should pull up the messages right here. What did I say to you? I said, "This video is so insufferable. Do I have to watch to the end? It's already been 3 minutes and 46 seconds, and the video is 5 minutes long." And then you reply, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't even watch it at all. I just sent it to you. I thought you should watch it." And I, like an idiot, just assumed that you sent me something to watch and that you would have watched it all, but you just wanted to pass it along to me and neglected to mention that you yourself didn't watch it. So I was super irritated at you by that.
I think I got the general gist, and the general gist is, technology is an illusion, and let's end the confusion and the delusion, and let's all get together and hold hands and get our heads out of the screens and smell the flowers and touch a baby and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree with the sentiment. Like, I sometimes feel really down about how much time I spend on computers and social media. Unlike you, this video should appeal to me more than you, because I do feel that life has become too skewed in that direction. But this video, 29 million views. Tell me what you thought about it.
Well, yeah, I just assumed that you were 100% on board with this nonsense. So I'm actually kind of surprised that it irritated even you. But yeah, so the basic, we'll put it in the show notes. So, good luck, people. You can watch it. But the basic premise of the video is exactly that people spend too much time on social media and blah, blah, blah. And there is the rhymey poem. And the video that's going on in the background shows people on their phones. But there's a kind of story, I guess, that's cut through it, which is... this guy it shows a guy who, instead of using his phone, is trying to find directions somewhere. And of course, a pretty girl walks by and he asks her for directions. And then they skip to them suddenly having dinner, right? Which I guess it's implied that she walked into wherever they were going to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so there was a story. So if you talk to real humans, you can...
Right, like a pretty girl will suddenly end up having dinner with you if you just ask her for directions. Which, first of all, I just think,
instead of using Google Maps.
Yeah, instead of using Google Maps. So many things wrong with that. But first of all, how many women are going to presumably walk a stranger to their location and then end up having dinner with them that night? I think the chances of that are pretty low. So I don't like the framing mechanism, just even to start with, for the video. And also. Again, the idea that there are only people in the real world, right? That there aren't people on the internet world. I think I mentioned before on the show, but I found my wife through the internet. Right? I would never have met her were it not for the internet. We had many a digital communication before we ever met in person. So the idea that the only way you can find true love is just by random chance walking around in the street asking strangers for for directions, and then being a total creepy person and having them walk you to that place long enough so that you can get to know each other, and then she invites you over for dinner, I guess, in this fantasy land of how human interactions go. No, it's the framing device is just awful, so I hate it.
But even you must realize that eventually you have to supplement this cyber relationship with a physical meeting. You bit the bullet one day and said, all right, I'm going to meet this woman before I actually marry her.
Yeah, no, obviously, yes. And that's the thing that I hate about a video like this is just the whole premise through something like this is that our technology is not any good because it separates us from each other. And I think that premise is obviously wrong. There's a totally reasonable argument to be made about the amount of time that people spend using technology. That's a completely reasonable argument. Yeah, but this idea, the premise of the video is like, go. It ends with the takeaway message is the next time you go outside, be sure to leave your iPhone behind so you can experience the real world. And it's like, what are you, crazy? Who's gonna do that? I'm not gonna do that unless I'm intentionally, I don't know, going to some isolation retreat for the weekend, which I would also say like that can be an interesting experience to do. There are places you can go that are intentionally separated from technology. I think that's a super cool experience, but I'm still gonna take my phone on in my car to get to that place for so many numerous reasons. It's just, these things just make me mad. They make me super mad. And
I also noticed, there's no way he could have known this was going to be watched as many times as it has been watched. And I have noted that he has activated advertising on his one video on YouTube. So I bet he's about to start spending a whole lot more time making YouTube videos.
Yes, probably. Was this uploaded recently?
I think he's about to enter the
April 25th. Whoa. So this is what, I guess now we're recording this, but 2.5, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
This guy's
I bet he's not going to think it's such an illusion and delusion when he starts getting a big check from YouTube.
Yeah, no kidding. 30 million views. That's like a third of my whole YouTube career. Right. But, no. So anyway, it makes me mad. And I think, now, the one that I liked a while back, and it's been a long time, but I'm going to presume, based on the kinds of things that Past Me would like, is that video was more reasonable about it. And I think that, I don't know if you experience this super often, but I will judge people harshly if we're in a social situation and someone is always distracted by their phone. Partly because it's taken a whole bunch of effort for everybody to come out and we're in a place, and if you are the person who was always on their phone or God, you're the person posting photographs of the thing that we're at right now. Yeah, I do kind of judge that a little bit. I think if you're socializing with other people, it's time to put your phone away and make a conscious effort to be present with the people that you're there with. I think that's the point of going out. If you didn't want to be there with the people, then you shouldn't have gone and you should have stayed home, and that's perfect. Yeah. That's perfectly fine. So I make it a very, very conscious effort that if I'm out with people, to not have my phone out, to not be checking the phone, and I think that's good, and that's a reasonable argument. The idea that you're gonna leave your phone at home is just ludicrous, or that the phone hasn't helped your life in just so many ways. That's the thing that gets me is people don't have iPhones for no reason. People have all of these smartphones and all of these devices because they're making a judgment that their life is way better with them than without them. So that's why I can't stand these things where it's Apple has made all of us sad by the magical, wondrous things that they have created, which we all voluntarily use every day because they're great. It just infuriates me.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying. It was pretty. Like you said. I'm probably more susceptible to that message, but
I kind of can't believe that you're on my side in this argument, to be honest.
Well, I think he lost me with his style. Whereas that other one, the one that was good from a year ago or so, that was a kind of cool and well shot, and I was sort of jealous of the filmmaking and thought, yeah, this is really coolly made. Whereas this one was kind of a bit I thought it was a bit twee and a bit, it didn't do it for me. So, and I'm not completely hardcore, but I do think there is, I think a bit differently to you on this, and we all do spend too much time on the internet, and me more than anyone, but.
Yeah. And again, I'm super open to the argument that there are times to put technology away. And I think many years ago, let me look up the name. I just want to double check I get this right. I think it was called the Prince Albert Hotel.
Listen to that fast typing! Wow.
I wasn't even looking at the keyboard when that was going on.
How do you know what buttons you were pressing?
Well, I have learned to touch type is how that has happened. So I knew I didn't quite get that right. I was just looking it up, and it was the Prince of Wales Hotel. So it's just wanted the name if people want to look it up. And it is in an amazingly gorgeous place, which is this national park that spans both Canada and the United States, called the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park. It is a stunningly beautiful place. If you're ever in the area, you need to take a trip to see it. And I happened to just stumble upon this place when I was doing a road trip across America. I didn't really intend to go there. I just sort of ended up there. And the hotel makes a big point of the fact that they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have internet. You're not going to get cell phone reception at that hotel, and that's part of the experience. And I think I ended up staying there for 2 or 3 days, and I thought it was just great. I love that kind of conscious decision that we're going to have this space where we remove technology, and they had a downstairs dining area where they encouraged everybody to come. And I said, look, there'll always be people here, and we want to try to encourage you to talk to other people in this setting. And I did, and it was really nice. It was really great. So there's definitely benefits to conscious exclusion of technology from certain areas. But the idea that all of life is made miserable by technology is just obviously ludicrous. So anyway, that's that.
Did the actual border run through the grounds, like between the two countries?
Well, not for this. That hotel was very clearly on the Canada side, but
Right.
it is this stunning forest, mountain range, glacier area, and both the United States and Canada thought that this mountain range would make a great national park. And then at some point they realized, oh, we both have these national parks that are butting up right against each other on our border. So why don't we make this like an officially managed area as an international park? So it's very, very cool, and you should go check it out if you're ever in the area.
The elephant in the podcast that we have not yet discussed.
Mm-hmm.
You've put a new video out.
Yes. We're recording this on Thursday night, and on Monday I put a video out, and there was a brief, glorious moment on the Gray versus Brady website where it showed me as having put out a video and you as having nothing at all. And so I had to screenshot that for myself to preserve this rare moment, because normally it says that you have released 27 videos since the last time I released a video. So I was happy to see that counter at least briefly reset with a real video. So
Before we talk about your video, I do have a few issues with that website.
Go right ahead.
Like I enjoy that it was made, and like I get a chuckle from it. But I think it manages to be unfair to both of us, which is quite amazing. It manages to portray both of us very unfairly.
Uh-huh.
That's a pretty special thing, really.
How do you think it treats both of us unfairly?
Well, how long have you got?
let's give it a few brief minutes. What do you think?
It treats you unfairly. Well, I guess maybe it treats me more unfairly, but it treats you a bit unfairly because it makes you look unproductive.
Uh-huh.
It makes it look like I'm, busily making videos and trying to educate the world while you're stagnating.
Right.
That's one way you could put it, which is completely unfair because of the completely different nature of our videos and the way they're made and the production cycles. So I think that's unfair on you. And then I think it's unfair on me, or maybe because it makes me look like I'm just whacking out videos while you're lovingly crafting videos in your studio. Mm-hmm. But also having these view counts and having the average view count. Obviously my average view count is very, very low compared to yours, partly because you have a much bigger, more successful channel, but also because
much bigger. Number file is pretty much the same number of subscribers as me.
No. But anyway, but also my average is being dragged down by all these other little videos I make for these little niche projects. Mm. So I think that average is a slightly deceiving figure. But then the total number of views, which obviously then puts me up probably higher than you again,
I think it does.
is also unfair because I have all these different projects and different things I'm working on, and some of them have help, and you're just So I think it's a bit unfair on both of us. But I love that it was made, and I do look at it and I get a laugh from it, and I think it's a good joke to have going. But
Yeah, that's exactly. I think it is mostly funny, and I think anybody who is enthusiastic enough to go to that website, like they know that it's funny, right? They understand how different our videos are. Right?
I do love the little Easter egg though, that when a new video is on there and the view counter has frozen at 301, so the view count just says 301 in there, they've actually made that a hyperlink to my 301 video that explains why views stick at 301. Have you noticed that?
I didn't notice the hyperlink.
Yeah.
I'm forever envious of your 301 video, because I had something in the works on that, and then you beat me to it. And so now you get to be the definitive video about why videos stop at 301 views. So well done for you on that one.
You should still make one, like, because you would do it better, and like it would be really cool to watch. Like,
yeah, I think yours is good. I think there was no reason to duplicate this. So you win this round. But I did not notice that there was a hyperlink on the 301. So that's good. That's a nice touch.
Oh no, yeah, it is. That was nice. I really want you to make a 301 video. I'd really like to watch that. Anyway, let's stop talking about that. Let's talk about your new video, which you put out this week on net neutrality, and which I've watched a couple of times and enjoyed very much. I thought it was excellent. Tell me about. Well, you must have made it very quickly. Was this a long? No. Tell me the story.
Yeah, this was a video that I think honestly took some weeks off the end of my life, because this was made under just the most unusual group of circumstances. So the short version of this is I was working on something, a main video for this month, which was not the net neutrality thing. But I don't know what it was. I think maybe I saw something on Reddit, or for some reason net neutrality was just on the top of my mind on Thursday night, the Thursday before I uploaded the video. And I remember going to bed, and it was kind of just cycling in my brain as I'm falling to sleep. I was thinking about net neutrality, and so then on Friday morning, when I went to do my usual work routine, I thought, let me just poke around and research the net neutrality thing a little bit. I can feel my brain is interested in this. This might be a good time to work on it. And Friday morning, I discovered that there's whole news while we're recording this right now, that in America, the FCC, which is the government body that kind of regulates all of this stuff, all of internet and telecommunications and everything in America, they announced that they're going to have some announcement related to net neutrality on the 15th of this month.
Right.
And so I discovered that on Friday morning. Look at my calendar. So what? Just so I can get this right, because what is that? So that would be the 2nd, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, that was Friday morning. Was the 2nd.
Yep.
And basically, I thought, oh God, this is the best time ever to make this video that I've been kind of thinking about for a while. Like, I had a bunch of notes already on net neutrality. If I'm ever going to do it, I have to do it right now. But it's going to be an advocacy video, so that means I need to get it out as soon as possible. And for various strategic trying to hit the news cycle reasons, that meant like, okay, I have to get this out on either Monday or Tuesday at the absolute latest. Now, knowing my normal production cycle, that is not really possible. But I was thinking, okay, I do already know a lot about this topic. I don't have to do a bunch of research on this, so I can cut all of that out. And this kind of thing, I think most people who watch my videos don't notice it, but it's a big deal for me. I stylistically have two different videos. There are videos where I'm talking to the audience directly. Those are the videos that usually start out where I say, hello, internet. And then I have what I think of as the main videos where stylistically I don't use the word I. I might make oblique references to my thoughts, but I very intentionally don't ever use the word I.
Yeah.
And the ones where I talk to the audience are way easier to write. I was thinking, okay, if I do this as a first-person centered video, and I don't need to do the research, is it possible to turn it around? And so I basically spent all of Friday trying to write a rough draft for the script, and I came to the conclusion that if I don't sleep, we might be able to get this out by Monday, which is what happened. But just to add in, the thing that made this a little bit more difficult, and it was just the worst timing in the world, was that both on that Monday, my wife was leaving for a trip where she's going to be gone for about a week. And so the idea of having to say, I'm not going to be around because I need to spend all of my time on this project right before you're going to go somewhere is not ideal.
That's not good, man.
Yeah, it's not good. And then you add into the fact that I had family visiting from America at this exact same time. And so I had to say the same thing that, oh, I know you flew across an ocean to see me, but I need to take 3 days to not be available because I need to go do a thing on the internet. So, like, this project was both incredibly rushed and under terribly difficult circumstances, but I did it because it is a topic that I super care about. Like, there are very few topics where I would look at that factor, all of these decisions, and say, but I should still make this video anyway. I think almost any other topic I would say, oh, I do not have the time or the resources, or just the sanity to be able to ignore my family in this time to be able to do it. So it was a very costly video in a whole bunch of ways. And yes, I ended up on Sunday, I did all of the animations and most of the audio, and I basically woke up Sunday at about 7 a.m., and I went to bed at 3 a.m., and then I got up Monday morning and finished up a couple final things. And so I was not in great shape that day, and I feel like I'm still slightly recovering from this ridiculous burst of work, which is not a sustainable way to work. So it was very exhausting from start to finish.
If it only took 3 days, just do that once a week.
Yeah.
And then like rest for the other 4 days. Then you could have a weekly video. That'd be brilliant.
Oh, man. No, oh God, no. That is a once, maybe twice a year kind of thing. And again, only under incredibly exceptional circumstances, and only for topics I know already that is that even possible. So I love you, internet, which is why I made that video. I think this is super important, but there's no way I could do normal videos like that and still be alive by the time I was 50. So
So let's talk about net neutrality for a minute. Obviously, I'm imagining almost everyone who listens will have seen your video, and if they haven't, well, maybe they should pause now and watch it.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, and dear listener who hears my voice right now, you can answer this question. I was kind of wondering if there's anybody who listens to this who doesn't watch both of our channels, or at the very least one of our channels. I'd be very curious in the Reddit if there is anybody who came upon this podcast in some other way, but didn't either know your channel or my channel before that. I'm just curious to know if that person exists. So if you exist and you're listening to me right now, Thomas, leave a comment in the Reddit and we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of curious, but
Vihat also just did a video which is excellent, which I'm sure you might mention and we'll definitely link to. Hank Green, I had missed Hank Green's, but I saw that today as well, and that's also very good.
I discovered his video after I spent my whole day writing the script, and then the first time I checked my computer email, one of the things that I saw was Hank Green uploaded a video. So I thought, oh cool, let me see what Hank has done, and then yes, Vihat uploaded her video yesterday. Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. I'm so still out of it. I think it was yesterday, but yeah. So just super brief for the record on this show. Net neutrality is basically it's this issue about what amount of control does the company that you buy your internet have over what comes through the wires. And net neutrality is the principle that they should basically have no control, that all of the data should be treated equally, and that whatever website you are attempting to access, that should just come through your internet cable at the maximum technically possible speed, or the maximum speed for whatever package you have paid for, and that there shouldn't be any ability to change that. So that is the principle of net neutrality in a nutshell. Treat all data coming through the pipe equally.
So this is so that sort of your internet provider can't do some deal where they say, we'll give you super fast Netflix, but your YouTube videos will be slow, and things like that.
In the US and in other parts around the world, companies, internet service providers, some of them anyway, are trying to get that rule removed, because if you are the person who's actually maintaining those internet connections, you want the ability to influence the traffic that is going through those wires. And you have as a company, you have a huge number of reasons that you would want to do this, but I would say what I would assume is one of the primary motivating factors is simply just money. If you control the final wire going into somebody's house, and you have the ability to artificially slow down various websites unless people, either the consumer who is already paying for the internet pays more for the speedy YouTube package, or or as has happened in the United States, where the internet service providers have charged, it sounds so awful, but they have charged other companies like Netflix additional money in order to just let Netflix through the wire as it's supposed to go.
It's like holding data for ransom, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically like holding data for ransom, and there are topics that are just basically impossible to talk about in terms of what they really are. Go to Wikipedia and read the article about how the internet works. You have all of these complicated connections between, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 providers, backbones, peering exchanges. There's all these huge levels of complexity. And I was speaking with a few people to try to sort out some of this stuff. And it's like, man, if you are not a network engineer, it's almost impossible to talk about this in the terms that it actually is. And so you see, as in my own video, as in Vihart's video, or as in Hank's video, people talk in terms of analogies, and the usual analogy is like a road, and people are talking about trucks and delivering packages and all the rest of that. And it's because there's no other way to talk about this. You can't have this discussion on the actual level of what it is, and then all of the arguments kind of get messed up when you're arguing over the analogy, because there's so many reasons that cars on a road is nothing like the way the internet works. Yeah. That it's very confusing, and it's one of the reasons why I absolutely hate it. But the internet service providers are often talking about building fast lanes. Like, oh, we want to build fast lanes for the internet, which sounds awesome, except that when you try to root through the technical details, what they really mean is like, oh, we'll slow down everything, and then the normal lane becomes the fast lane. And everything else is going through the slow lane, and it's simply fast by comparison. But it's just such a complicated issue, and I have some just incredibly deep disappointments with the video that I produced, but I'm relatively happy with it given the time constraints and given the kind of goal from my perspective, which was to talk about net neutrality in the most general possible terms, so not specifically related to the issues going on in America, and in a way that might hopefully give a person unfamiliar with the technology some notion of why it is bad. So those were basically my goals for that. I was not attempting to explain more of the details of what's going on, and for that, I think Vihart, who we actually were talking, Vihart spotted me on Twitter asking a particular question, and the couple of times I've talked with Vihart in person, it's just creepy, but sometimes we have the exact same thoughts about something, or like we know what the other person is thinking. And Vihart saw me ask a relatively innocuous question on Twitter where I was asking people for help with something, and basically sent me a message a minute later where she said, I know exactly what you're working on. You're working on a net neutrality video, and I am too. It's like, yes, Vihart, you can read my mind. So she showed me her script, and we had a little bit of a discussion about it. But if you want a video that does a much better job of talking, still in analogies, but much more about like what are the details of this and what is happening in America right now, Vihart's video is a much better video than mine for that. Mine, I think, is a much more general one that I hope will be applicable in future situations if net neutrality problems come up elsewhere.
I was having a think about like discussing this, and because obviously sometimes my role here is to be a bit of a devil's advocate, just to kind of nudge you a bit to find out more about what you think. Mm-hmm. But this really is a case of where being the devil's advocate is being an advocate of the devil in a way, because it's hard to kind of reconcile the opposing position. And like I was doing it to myself in my head, saying I could ask Gray this, or I could put this to him, But I was just like, my argument was falling apart before it even came out of my mouth, because I kind of, I think we're pretty much in agreement, and like no one, you know, net neutrality is really important to me, like for my job too. So, but I will try.
Well, before you even try, I'm just going to simply say that I did get a whole bunch of comments both on YouTube and on Reddit where people were asking, well, what's the other side to this, or why would a government even consider doing this? And most of the time, I would try to explain that if there was some kind of reasonable argument to be had on the other side. But there are definitely times when there is no reasonable argument to be had on the other side. I can understand why the company wants to do it, but there's no argument to be made for why it is good for either society or the internet as a whole, is my position. So now I will let you devil's advocate after I've put that in ahead of time. So there you go.
Well, I guess the first question, like the most fundamental question to this, is data and like access to the internet a fundamental right? Like, like having air to breathe, and to a lesser extent access to power and water. I know there are a lot of people who don't have that, but how fundamental a right is this? Because a lot of the chest beating that goes on is like, how dare you slow this one down and give me this one fast, I want it all the same. And I guess the question is, well, hang on, we have this real sense of entitlement about the internet and data and access to it. Is it like a right? Should we just expect to be able to have it in the first place?
I think you can reasonably call it a right in the same way electricity is a right once your society is at a certain level of wealth. That it doesn't make sense to deprive your citizens of plumbing or electricity or internet if your GDP per capita is above amount X. So it's not a fundamental right in the same way that you might say, or that one might make an argument for food being kind of fundamental to being a human. Obviously the internet is not. But if your society is wealthy enough, it's just crazy not to ensure that everybody has access to the internet. So that's a little bit the way I would look at it. But the entitlement thing is interesting because the internet works very differently in countries around the world, and until very recently, the UK did not have any kind of net neutrality laws. Yeah. And everything was basically sort of fine with UK internet. But the reason things were okay with UK internet has to do with competition regulation. So basically, in the UK, for almost everybody, you have a genuine choice of internet service providers. I think in our latest flat, when I went to look, there was something like 7 companies that we could buy our internet from if we wanted to.
Right.
And so this is internet neutrality matters a lot more in a place like the United States, where almost everybody has no choice with their internet service provider. And now this has to do a lot with regulations in particular countries, and I sort of don't want to get into that. But I would just say that net neutrality, I think it is very important, but there are circumstances under which it is not necessarily the most important thing. If you have genuine competition between internet providers, you can do okay without net neutrality because they all act as a check on each other. But yeah. I swear, America sometimes tries to make sure it does the worst of everything and then combine it together to make it even worse than anything could be in a kind of amazingly awesome badness synergy. And so both having no competition and then not having any kind of regulations to ensure that your monopoly provider does a halfway decent job is just the worst of both worlds. It just makes it absolutely terrible. So
I think that's where I think that's the real nub of the matter there, because the one thing I think from our discussions over time is, I know you're a big believer in market forces and things working out, like commercial forces often allowing things to work out. So part of me was thinking, what's Gray worried about? Like, surely the right thing, if someone's trying to make money, they're allowed to make money, and if they can be undercut, they'll be undercut, and the rest. But this is not the case. And my experience of the internet is the same as yours in the UK, in that I shop around and get the best deal I can. But I mean, you point out there, this is not the case in the US, so they've got you over a barrel.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I would just say that I think markets are a particular kind of tool, and they're not universally applicable in every situation. You just have to think about what situations do markets work best under. And for a situation where you have to dig up streets and lay cables in the ground is a huge startup cost to becoming an internet service provider. The barrier to entry is so large as to effectively exclude any kind of genuine competition. And that can be the problem with the internet. So unless you live in a place that has laws that say, we're going to eventually make sure that all of these cables any company can use, and figure out a way to make sure that works for everybody. If you don't have that, you can't start up a competitive internet service provider, because you have like call me when you've dug the roads to dug ditches to every house in America and laid fiber optic cable inside of them, right? Like once you've done that, let me know, and then you can start up your internet service provider. And I think the great example of this is Google in America, who is starting up an internet service provider, but it is taking years and it is going very slowly. And from everything I read, it is just insanely costly to actually do. And they can only do it in relatively small cities because of having to dig up the roads and all these other things. Like, can you imagine a city like New York saying, okay, we're going to shut down the roads for a few months as we allow a whole bunch of companies to lay down competitive cables underneath these streets? I mean, it just can't happen. There's almost no way it would ever be worth shutting down New York for something like that. So there are situations under which market forces just cannot possibly work, and this is definitely one of them. So it's a tricky situation, and I just think again it's so hard to explain. But I mentioned it really briefly in the video, but I had a way longer section that I thought I had to cut down because I couldn't possibly do it in the allocated time. But I really think that the best comparison for net neutrality is not the roads, but it is the electrical grid. And that we have an electrical grid that in every country in the world, when you plug something in your house, the electricity company doesn't have any say over how you're using that electricity on your end. You buy a certain amount of electricity, just like you buy a certain amount of data from your internet service provider, and the electricity company, it's none of their business what you do with that. If you're running it, light bulbs or computers or anything else, that's not their job, right? Their job is to just deliver electricity. And it's a similar situation where we have these regulations that don't allow the electricity company to charge you differently for different things in your house, because the barrier to entry for starting up an electrical company, building a gigantic power station, running electrical lines all over the country, it's just too big, right? That can never be a competitive market. And even if in theory it could be, we wouldn't want dozens of electrical wires running into everybody's house, only one set of which is ever active at a time, because that's the company that people have happened to buy their electricity from. So I really think that is the best comparison to what the situation is with the internet, and it becomes more understandable about why we have to ensure there are certain protections in this area, because it's just competition is just never going to happen on its own in this environment. So
and you're treating data like electricity, this kind of anonymous same block of stuff that flows in.
It's a commodity is what it is. Yeah. 1 watt is just as good as 1 bit on the internet is my perspective on it. And the electricity company...
I guess the difference there, though, is the electricity company can do deals with the electricity generators, and there's a bit of wheeling and dealing going on there. We'll buy this many megawatts this year at this price, etc. And that's isn't that kind of what the ISPs are starting to do? They're starting to say, hang on, let's start doing deals with the people generating the data, Netflix and things like that. But the only way they can monetize data is the amount of it or the speed of its flow, because It's not like you can do a deal with a power station. You can't do that same deal with just the internet
Well,
as a whole.
the thing that's weird about this, which I think it's a strange framing issue, but it's people are talking about Netflix's data, for example, in the United States, taking up a huge amount of the bandwidth.
Yeah.
But that's not Netflix's data. That is the data that I am trying to download from Netflix with the internet connection that I paid for. Right? Like you are purchasing access to the internet from your ISP. The very notion that Netflix is sort of getting in the way is just or taking
Flooding
up
it,
or flooding it.
pipes.
Right, it's like Netflix isn't flooding the pipes. People are sucking data out of Netflix with the connections that they have paid for. And also the thing that I find particularly galling about this is that the way the data flows on the internet is that a lot of times it travels like 90% of the way to your house through networks that are just unrelated to the actual person providing you with the internet at the very end. Right? So they're charging you, right, to just basically get from the street to your front door sometimes, where they're like, oh, suddenly it's a huge problem that we have to deliver this Netflix data. And it's like, hey guy, this came across a continent sometimes maybe to get to me. And you're telling me that suddenly once it gets to my front door, it's shockingly expensive to let it get the last 30 feet. I mean, that's a little rich. So that's the problem that I have with this framing of the issue that like Netflix is slowing down the internet, when it's actually the problem is that people are demanding Netflix. And this again,
but that's like saying it's not McDonald's fault. You know, it's the fat Americans buying all the burgers. Like that's true, but McDonald's have created a demand for something that causes a problem. And is it not true that sort of Netflix is this, you know, very successful company that is selling video data has suddenly created a demand for something, and then the ISPs have, if it's causing them all these problems, which is a debate to be had, but let's say it is causing them a problem. Yeah, let's assume it is. They have two choices. They either ramp up the price on the consumers, or they go straight to the source of the hamburgers and say, look, if you're going to start putting all these hamburgers in the pipes, you're going to have to pay something for it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what they've done, isn't it?
Yeah, and here's where again I think that the problem is that the internet just works nothing like anything else. The hamburger analogy is sort of okay for the real world, but again take it back to the electricity company to talk about that same problem, right? So imagine it's I don't know, it's 1920, right? And we have electricity, we have electric light bulbs, and there's some infrastructure in place that is supplying all of the light bulbs across the country with electricity from these electric companies and the power stations.
Yeah.
The current situation is a bit like, okay, as time goes on, we're inventing more and more electrical doohickeys, right, that we want to plug into the wall. And we have vacuum cleaners and washing machines and all these other kinds of things. And the electricity companies, who are in this analogy are the internet service providers, are basically saying that they don't want to build any more infrastructure than the infrastructure that was already there.
Yeah,
and
like the wires and the poles.
All the wires, the poles, and importantly the power stations, right? That's what they don't want to build because power stations are big and expensive. Yeah. And so what they do instead is start charging you based on what it is that you want to plug into the wall, forcing everything in all the light bulbs in your house to be dimmer because there's more and more Americans with more and more light bulbs, so we have to make the light bulbs dimmer.
Yeah.
And but the problem here is like, okay, electricity company, I can understand that under some circumstances, if the demand for light bulbs, you know, it went way up faster than you were expecting, people have more electrical devices than you were expecting. Okay, maybe there's some scenario under which you would theoretically have to do this. But the issue is, like, as a society, what we want to encourage is we want to encourage you, electrical company, to build more power stations, right? So that everybody has more electricity so that they can do more things with that electricity, right? Like my washing machine, like your computer's doing work for you all day long. Society as a whole wants more power. And so what you have to do if you're in a situation where markets don't work, because normally if there's huge demand, right, a market, that's what markets do great, is that they are able to fill that demand. But if you don't have a situation where markets work, you have to make sure that the regulations encourage creation of new infrastructure. And so if you tell electrical companies, look, we're not going to let you charge different prices just so you don't have to build a power station, you can't do that. You have to make sure that they build more power stations. And so I think that is very analogous to the current situation with the internet service providers, is they're whining and moaning about how full their pipes are with all this data from the internet. And all I can think of is, hey, internet providers, don't you think this is a good sign that people want more internet? And net neutrality is a great kind of regulation that forces them to increase investments in infrastructure. Right? If they can't start biasing what data they let into your house at what particular speeds, the only solution for them is that they have to start building more infrastructure, which is what you want as a society as a whole. Because in 10, 20 years' time, I think it's a pretty good prediction that actual data going across the internet is going to quintuple in that period of time at the least. So we need to ensure the creation of more infrastructure. We don't want to set up a situation where companies can get away using their same infrastructure forever because they can do this kind of horrible variable pricing and not have to make the investments that we as a society actually want to be made. So that's where I think the analogy to other companies just falls down a little bit, is because we want to encourage more pipes, and our only tool is through regulations. So that's why we have to keep this net neutrality in place, because it acts as an incentive to encourage the creation of more infrastructure, in addition to just all the fairness issues that come along with net neutrality about biasing one kind of data over another. So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, if you're going to do it like that, if you're going to be using the law as an instrument to make a commercial company do something, why faff around the edges? Why not just say, all right, you have to do it. You have to build the government. You're saying the government and society is going to make a commercial entity do something they don't want to do, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Why not just pass a law then? If you want to keep the cables, you've got to build more infrastructure. You've got to build more cables.
Yeah, well, the internet's such an interesting topic because so many countries handle this in different ways. And in some places, the internet is basically nationalized in the same way that some countries they build all the sewer pipes and they build all the internet pipes, and that's just the way it is. And other countries have more hybrid models. I would say in the U.S., the political sentiment is generally very resistant to having the government directly do things. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's right. It depends a lot on the particular situation.
Yeah.
But in America, that Americans generally don't like to expand the scope of government if they don't have to. So I can't imagine a situation where someone said, hey, what would be a great idea? Let's nationalize all the broadband providers. That would not go down well in America. And again, I think there might be legitimate reasons why you shouldn't do that in a place like America. I can definitely understand that kind of argument. So I'm just looking at that as a certain kind of tool that you have to try and basically as a stick move companies in the right direction if you can't control them directly, is just force them to do this thing that they don't necessarily want to do. But in America, instead, the FCC is very likely to turn around and just say, oh, net neutrality doesn't exist, and now your existing business is way more profitable because you can charge both your customers more and the other companies more, and you don't have to make huge infrastructure investments just immediately. And so it's all very depressing in America, and I have to say I'm quite glad at the moment anyway to be in the UK, where there's actual broadband competition, and as the EU, I think it was just last month, the EU passed laws guaranteeing that there is net neutrality in the European Union as well. So it's, thumbs up for Europe on internet policy, thumbs down to America. Unless of course I'm wrong and the FCC chairman comes out on the 15th and says, I heart net neutrality. But since he is apparently a former lobbyist who used to work for Comcast, one of the biggest broadband providers, I'm not super hopeful that he's going to come out with a pro net neutrality stance. So
it'll be spun as neutral though. There'll be a spin to it to make it sound like it's a good thing. But
I wouldn't be surprised if they just come straight out and use the same fast lane technology talking point that I see on the news everywhere. Oh, we want to encourage the creation of fast lanes on the internet, so blah blah blah. That is kind of, if I had to put money on the table, I would be fairly willing to bet that you might hear the exact phrase "fast lane" in the FCC announcement on the 15th. That would be slightly my prediction.
If it goes badly, or if it goes against how you would like to see it go, what will be the sort of medium term? How will the problems start to manifest themselves for both people in America, but for also you as a YouTuber? Do you fear for yourself?
Well, I don't. I can say that I am not concerned for me personally in terms of my career, because we put our videos up on YouTube, and I'm assuming that Google would be able to pay basically like the ransom money that ISPs are asking for to make sure that YouTube comes through the pipes quickly. So I think it's a bit of an overstatement to say that you're worried about YouTube, because YouTube is an entity that is connected to an incredibly powerful and relatively wealthy company. So I'm not concerned that YouTube is going to go away. I think that the bigger issue is it is stagnation for the internet in the longer term. So I think that this, based on the way the ruling goes, you can expect that internet speeds will continue to just not really grow in America by any significant amount. But I think from a customer's perspective, the worst thing is it's for someone who's kind of unaware of these issues, they're not going to notice anything. And if the internet service provider is slowing down artificially some websites, they're not going to think, boy, my internet service provider is a total jerk. They're just going to think that some particular websites happen to be really slow and kind of blame those websites precisely because the blessed websites come through really fast, right? So obviously their internet connection is fast. It just so happens that some websites are slow. I think that would end up being the general perception from the population. So I have to say,
but then we come down to just like commercial realities of life, like successful, just like everything else in life. If you're successful, you go to the top. Will it not be that way with websites? The rich websites that can pay the ransom are successful, in much the same way that successful airlines that have good marketing campaigns become successful, or the food companies that do the best become successful. Is it not fair that the internet goes the way of everything else in life, that the successful rise to the top because in the end they have the means to do it via their success, and those that are unsuccessful have to work harder to become successful?
Yeah, I mean, when you pose it like that, it sounds like the status quo in terms of human society. But from my perspective, the most amazing thing about the internet is it is this incredible meritocracy that we have never seen before. And that it just is obviously great that people can start little companies or they can just post stuff on the internet, and so many people can see or use that just immediately. And you don't need to pay some kind of gatekeeper to ensure that your new business is able to get the same kind of access as the big boys. Now, I understand that there are always going to be advantages to players with more money. So YouTube, I know, like, it does invest in a lot of genuine infrastructure to try to make sure that YouTube in particular is very fast with local data centers and all of these kinds of things. I understand that happens, but it doesn't change the fact that for lots of teeny tiny companies, they can make their website and that has whatever service it is, and it can become incredibly popular in a very short period of time. And right now they don't have to worry about someone knocking on the door and saying, oh, you're using too much of these pipes. That I think that is just great. It's such a meritocracy, like we've never seen before in human history. And that is my concern, is that losing net neutrality makes it less meritocratic. It reinforces the power of existing players more, and I don't think that is good. I don't like that kind of influence. And in the
Is it not inevitable? Is it not inevitable that, sure, the internet had this little fairy tale period for a while, but if it's going to survive in a capitalist society, the capitalist world, which a lot of the world is, eventually people are going to get wise and think, well, hang on, you've been immune from the rules of capitalism for too long. It's time for a reality check. And
well, again, it's capitalism for who, right? It's capitalism for companies on the internet is nothing but just like the most pure market competition ever. You know, people can use different services on the internet. Companies can start up, they compete, they're born, they die. It all happens just in an incredible way on the internet. The question is, do the people who control the plumbing underneath also get to suddenly compete in also not capitalism, but basically predatory monopoly practices, which is just the shocking dark side of what can happen in capitalism.
when you put it like that, it sounds a bit meaner.
It does.
Predatory monopoly.
But that's what it is, right? You have someone who has monopoly power over infrastructure and is then able to engage in rent-seeking behavior from traffic flowing through those pipes that they have absolutely nothing to do with. Like, there's no argument that there's capitalism happening at the plumbing level, at the level of the actual fibers in the ground. You know, no more than it's practical to have capitalism on the level of the roads to your house. It's the same kind of thing. You wouldn't give some company the ability to put toll booths on every single road in an entire country, and then also charge different rates to different trucks that want to pass through those tolls, even if they're the same weight, but one truck is carrying some goods that the company who controls the toll roads doesn't like. Like, that's just crazy, and that's not capitalism in any sense of the word. So there's two very, very different levels here, and I think you have just super efficient, super interesting market forces on the level that we interact with, which is nothing but good. But the level beneath it is not possible to have that same kind of level of interaction. Mm-hmm. So, and also I just have to say here, my concern with the America ruling in particular, it is not so much about the details of this ruling that from our time when we're recording this is going to happen in basically about a week. It's my concern about what I see often in particularly in American politics is this establishing of a precedent that you can then build upon to make things even worse. So again, I recommend you go to Vihart's video if you want all of the details, but basically it's like companies have the ISPs have wormed their way into the situation where they have all of the kind of legal protections that what are called common carriers have. They're not responsible for the traffic that flows through their pipes. They have all of these legal protections, but throughout all of our history, those legal protections have come at particular costs, and now they're trying to work their way out of the costs that we as a society want to impose on them. And so it's just, I don't like the precedent it's setting. It reminds me of, in America, the initial rulings about money as free speech in America. And I remember being really frowning my face at that, and it was not because of that particular ruling, but because I thought, man, that ruling is a horrible precedent that allows things to happen later. And that's what we have seen over the years, is slowly but surely, once you establish that money is free speech, there's all sorts of other constraints that you eventually have to take away. Like in America, limits to giving to campaigns. They said that, well, we don't limit how much someone can talk about a candidate. So if money is just like talking, you can't limit how much talking you can do about a candidate. So we can't limit how much money you can give a candidate either. And that's my concern about the net neutrality ruling, is I do not want to give the local internet service providers more power to discriminate either in favor or less in favor of the data that is flowing through their pipes. I'm worried about where that goes in future steps once you establish this as a precedent, that the companies are allowed to have some kind of control about what's flowing through those wires. So that's where my concern comes from.
One thing I would say, that common carrier point, I think, is really key to this. And that's one thing that, I mean, I loved your video, but that's one thing I really took from Vi's video.
Yes.
That hit home with me. Like, when I sit and formulate any argument, for the dark side here and think, well, maybe we don't need net neutrality, as soon as that common carrier issue comes up, the argument falls to pieces. And I think anyone who Vi's video is quite long, 11 minutes. I mean, not long by my standards, but it's quite long for a YouTube video. But if you stick with Vi's video and get to that common carrier part, that's a real killer issue.
Yeah, we won't spoil anything here, but one of the examples she uses is, which I think is very illustrative, is airlines are classified as common carriers.
Yes.
And what that means is that airlines have to sell tickets to just whoever is buying airline tickets. They're not allowed to discriminate against employees of one particular company or another particular company. And one of the benefits of being a common carrier is that you're not responsible for whatever the people are doing with your airplane transportation. So if people are using your airplane to commit a crime and they're getting from one location to another location that they need to, you as the airplane company are not responsible for that.
Yeah.
And this actually originally came up from, I wanted to mention this part, but this came up when I was doing some of my research, was originally this came from telegraph companies in the United States. And the whole idea of the common carrier came from there, which was that telegraph companies were accepting money to duplicate messages that one company was sending and send their messages to their competitor, who was paying to hear all of the correspondence that their competitor was up to. So basically paying to wiretap their telegraphs. And the telegraph companies made the argument saying, well, these are our wires, right? We built this telegraph network, we can do whatever we want. And if that means if someone is willing to pay us to send them a copy of all the communications from a particular individual, if we think that's a good business idea, we can totally do that, right? And the court stepped in and said, no, you cannot do that. You have to treat all of these messages the same. And that's the very notion of a common carrier. And that's the same kind of rule to apply to the internet, is to say, like, you are a common carrier of data. And one of the benefits of that means, like, again, if people were using the telegraph to plan their bank robbery, you, the telegraph company, are not complicit in that. You are not helping them conspire, because you just have to treat all the messages the same. That's the benefit that you, the telegraph company, get. So, yeah, it's the common carrier thing is in the petitions that we have to the FCC. You're supposed to use this phrase to say, like, we would like you to classify internet service providers as a class 2 common carrier in the United States, which comes with all of these kinds of responsibilities, but also these freedoms from being complicit in what's actually traveling through your network. I would think if you're an internet service provider, you don't want to be responsible for anything going through those pipes, because it's just terrifying, right? What people might actually be doing on the internet. So yeah, that's
they enjoy that cloak of protection, but they don't want to toe the line in some other aspects of it. So
yeah, that's exactly it.
Well, hopefully next time we talk about this, we'll be talking about, it wasn't as bad as we thought, but you don't sound hopeful.
I am not optimistic, is what I would say. But it's because I look at the structure of the way that this was set up. The FCC is not a democratic body. You don't elect people to the FCC. They're just appointed, and they don't necessarily have any meaningful accountability to the general public. And so I have a tiny glimmer of hope in that they pre-announced their announcement. They said, we are going to announce something about the net neutrality rulings on the 15th. Right. In the meantime, we're opening it up to public inquiry.
They were taking the temperature.
That is my only glimmer of hope, is that they wanted to see, okay, how riled are people going to be about this? My hope is that they felt there was enough rilement to warrant maybe not doing what they were going to do. Mm-hmm. I was tracking, I used a URL tracker to see how many people clicked on the link in my video to go to the FCC. And of course, I can't know how many people filled in the form, which the FCC goes way out of its way to scare you into not doing, and it makes it super user unfriendly. But at the time of the recording, about 50,000 people at least clicked the link in my video to go to the FCC page. So
I reckon 1 in 100 at best.
Yeah, that's slightly my guess as well, as maybe 1 in 100 would fill out the actual form. But I can't know that. I don't know what the results are, but I am not optimistic I expect the FCC to just have some opening line in their statement about how we really listened to what you said, and everybody said they wanted a better internet, and so our regulation changes today are to encourage a better internet with new fast lanes for you to get the content that you want as fast as it can be delivered, and yeah, that's basically what I expect to talk about next time. So I really hope I'm wrong, but I'm not optimistic.
I feel a bit like I didn't give you much of a hard time and make you duck and wave, but that's because I think this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, there is no other side to this issue.
Yeah, and yet it might not work out. There are a couple of things off topic though. I think we should point out as we wrap things up.
Yeah.
I have an admission to make at the end here, Gray.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew beforehand that I wasn't very well, and I wasn't feeling 100%, but well enough to do the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I've now realised I've recorded the whole thing on my built-in microphone on the computer and not my big posh microphone.
I was asking you about the microphones in the beginning. All right, well, we have to retroactively apologize to the people for your terrible audio quality then.
I'm sorry, man. I'm
okay.
apologising to you as well. I feel really bad. I realised about 15 minutes ago and it feels really bad.
Don't worry, this stuff is bound to happen eventually. So sooner or later, I will be doing the whole thing, talking into my laptop microphone, and I'll sound terrible one day. So don't worry, it's bound to happen.
You know what the funny thing was? This was the first time I didn't do the backup recording onto my camera with a radio mic as well. It was the first time I said I'm not doing it.
Yeah, of course, that's when this was going to happen. So don't worry, it's really no issue.
Are you mad at me? Are you mad?
I don't even understand how I would be mad.
Oh, gosh, I can understand. Can I put one last thing out there about net neutrality as well?
Yeah, what?
In much the same way that I think copyright infringement is the wrong term, I think net neutrality is bad PR.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, it couldn't be a more neutral, less provocative term if it tried. It's even got the word neutral in it.
Yeah.
That was a mistake or a genius, depending on who came up with it.
Tim Wu from Stanford came up with that in 2002, I believe.
And is he pro the neutrality, or is he against it? He's pro, isn't he?
He is pro net neutrality, and
he should have called it something different then, because that's a terrible thing to have called it.
Yes, but if I can just point out, I skimmed through the original paper that came across this term, and the paper was just a technical paper talking about a particular property of certain networks. This was well before this ever became a political issue. So
yeah.
This was not like someone was trying to coin a term for a political debate. Someone was just trying to have a useful technical term to describe certain kinds of networks. And in that circumstance, net neutrality is a great term. But I completely agree with you. And I mean, I've in discussions online and in real life with people, I have found that everybody has a hard time with this term. Even people who are technically oriented very easily have run into this issue of, am I for net neutrality or am I against net neutrality?
Yeah.
And in my own video, I only say net neutrality, I think 3 times, and in all those times, I very intentionally tried to structure the sentence so that it was super clear that you should be for this. Right, so like the video ends with defend net neutrality, and I think it starts with an important part of the way the internet works is net neutrality. But for most of the video, I was thinking about what could I say instead, and I was using the term data equality. I was trying to come up with something that's better.
Yeah, that is a bit better. It still doesn't grab me by the throat the way that freebooting does, but But I think that is a better term.
That was the best I could come up with, and also
it needs like maybe fairness.
Can I point out something just slightly here? The more I think about freebooting, the less I like it. I hate to tell you this, Brady, but the more I think about freebooting, the less I like it. And I can't remember who it was because we're just doing this now. But somebody proposed the alternative view jacking, which the more I think about it, I'm way more in favor of the term view jacking than freebooting. So I don't mean to.
Sounds too much like some rubbish sort of 80s movie. Like,
I know what you're saying.
View jackers.
I don't mean to split the vote on this just so briefly after you made it into the Urban Dictionary and we're going to try to get you into the Oxford English Dictionary. But the more I think about it, I think freebooting has the same kind of thing, which is, oh, am I for freebooting? I like free stuff. And that net neutrality has, which is, again, like, oh, am I for the neutral thing or am I against the neutral thing? It is not a good term politically. And yeah, data equality is not the greatest, but it's better. Data fairness? I don't know. Maybe we can ask the listeners, if they're still listening, since we're just rambling on now, what terms they think would be better than net neutrality. So.
And if they can hear a word I'm saying on this microphone, I apologise, listeners. I apologise, Gray. I wasn't well, and I set my computer up incorrectly, and I will be punishing myself.
You know what we should talk about next time?
What?
Checklists. I have a lot of checklists. You need a checklist. Please email me if you want.